name's RT. Actually, I live in Oregon, but I work in California. I went to California from Washington State. I thought I was going to stay 10 years and make some money and go home. And I met a girl. That was 25 years ago, and I finally get out of California. But up where I live in Oregon, there's not a lot of horseshoeing going on. But this is kind of me in a nutshell. My wife and I have a little farm in Oregon. I have 2 grown kids and 7 grandkids, and I come to Colorado every November and go deer and elk hunting. Started my career 36 years ago. I get out of shoeing school, and the instructor says, when you go home, I want you to charge $5 more than the best horseshoer in your town. And I thought, well, that's kind of nonsensical. I know all these guys, they don't want to do that. So I get home, the first call I get is from one of my musician friends, and she has a little Arab that nobody could get hind shoes on. Well, I went to Oklahoma horseshoeing school, I can get hind shoes on that thing. And my instructor at the time gave me a stall jack that was about the size of a coffee cup on a peg. And it's 100 degrees outside, and I got this little bugger tied to a barbed wire fence, and I'm trying to shape shoes on it, and every time I hit it, it'd fall down. So it took me all day. I got $35, and I trimmed her pony, and I sprung my brand new GE nippers on this pony. So day number 2, I ordered a forge and an anvil, and I went up $5. So my second day in business, I was making $40 a horse and $15 for a trim, so I was the highest paid shoe in my valley on day 2. I always like to start these presentations with this. This is This was a video by Scott Lampert. I teach Farrier science at Santa Rosa Junior College. Come on, work. And it works, really, I promise. There we go. It's short to just kind of illustrate how remarkable these animals are and what we put them through. And the basic topic of our talk today is just how improper trimming and shoeing can lead to lameness. And I've got some really interesting case studies, but I love to talk about my successes, but I've got several failures as well. I tell my students at the college that we could do this job for 2 lifetimes and not really figure it out. The thing about that is I have students that most of them don't know what in to feed and what in to clean up after, so I can tell them anything I want. But you get in front of a crowd like this, I've got to be real careful what I say. So make this really informative. If you want to yell at me, just holler. This one, my favorite was right off the wire. Anyway, this shows how they move and how they land. Scott Lampert, I don't know if you know him. He put this together many years ago. I put it on my Facebook page, and it got 20,000 views or something. But he was real creative with, he created a software to do this kind of stuff with him. He didn't do it anymore. But I had it for a little while, and I couldn't figure it out because I'm really not a computer guy. But you notice how much they slide when they land. You know, I started when synthetic footing first came out. I started having horses stumble for no apparent reason. And I went to a clinic in Sacramento, and there was a gentleman there from Canada that had every kind of synthetic footing that you could put in an arena and a rusty shoe, and we polished them with this rusty shoe. Now, I guess it's a benefit to it if you fall on the butt because it's nice and cushy to land, but there's no give to it. When you see these horses land, they have to slide. That's their shock absorber. And so he started putting rolled toes on everything, and he said his vet bills went down 35%. I ran home, I had a jumping barn, and just all of a sudden on synthetic footing that was buckling over. I started putting synthetic shoes on them, and it really made a difference. So, you know, we all probably heard this from Scott Simpson, that there are 5 basic shapes of shoes, and that's fairly accurate. I think Doug Butler, when he took his worshipful company test, he challenged the British people about this, and they didn't buy it, and he had a coffin bone that matched every one of these shapes. And how important is it to shape a shoe to fit a foot? I took this personally, because this was a former apprentice of mine. and I followed him into the barn where the horses were all going south. There were 7 horses, and I didn't put all the shoes on there, but you can't really tell what's the front and what's behind. And I guarantee you, those 7 horses had 7 different shaped feet. They did not look like that. And you could lay all those shoes on top of each other, and they matched completely. And that's just a little example on the other side of what I took off versus what I put on. And, you know, I think when I first started shoeing, they started coming out with pre-shaped front hinds, which was super convenient. But if you don't know how to work your forge and your amble, I think you compromise a lot, because very rarely do they fit coming out of the box. And, you know, you get a lot of hind shoes with big bold toes, and you got to spend a lot of extra time to forge a toe until you get them to fit. And back then, somebody talked about purchase. I thought that meant you bought something, but now I know better. It's friction, interaction with the ground. And this is a quick trick he let me use this. We're both grandparents now, so he said, one grandpa to another, you can use it whatever you want. But he started talking about hind foot shapes, and really that's the motor. Our clients look at the front feet, and if we do a really pretty job, you put your heart and soul into the bottom of that foot. But if it's pretty, and their friend says, that looks really good, he did that, unfortunately, that's how we get paid. But now a lot of people look at the motor, and that's what gets them started. And I use this when I get a new horse, which I don't get too many new clients anymore. But every once in a while, I want to come in about it. And if the foot's just going all over the place, I want to know where to start. I want to know what shape that coffin bone is. And in my business, and I'm not saying anybody else does it wrong, but the way I do it is I really try and match the shape of that bone. And I found that, well, I got an example here. A situation like this where the toe, the toe kind of gets a little wide. A lot of people I've seen shoe to that toe flare, and eventually that's how you start getting hoof wall separation. You start getting hoof wall separation, you start getting white line disease, and you all know what that does. 30 some odd years ago was the first time I ever saw that. Nobody really knew what it was. We all called it CD toe, but it was just start to migrate all the way up to the coronary band. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with an improperly shaped appliance. That foot is going to try and morph itself to whatever you put on the end of it. So if you have a big flare and you shoot at that flare, it's not going to go away, right? So this is an interesting article, and I carried this in my truck for many years. It was done by a Farrier named John Scruggs, who I do not know, and a physics professor. And they figured out mathematically what it takes to propel the body forward. It's my understanding, and I've tried to get a hold of John Scruggs for the last several years and never could, but they've edited this slightly, so the numbers I've given you or that I'm going to show you are slightly inaccurate, but very, very close to the original. And it talks about the mathematical laws that govern everything in the universe. It applies to everything that moves. And like he says, the fish in the sea are your horse's toes. Horses propel from the hind end, we all know that. If we rock or roll square or set the shoe back, it becomes problematic for propulsion because they can't get into the ground, they can't purchase. And when I was in Washington State, I would say probably 80% of my clients were barrel racers. And you get one to win and then you get them all, right? So I started noticing at the end of the season, a lot of the girls were having body work done. The lumbars were tight, the gaskins were just tighter than a banjo string. And I started watching these horses that come into the barrel, and instead of driving off the hind end, they were pulling themselves around the barrel with the front end, and the hind end was kicking around, and they were losing time. So I started rethinking the way I looked at back feet. And like most everybody else, I took a hind shoe out of the box, pre-shaped, nailed it on the go. Most of them had a really bold toe, so I started focusing on finding the true shape of that hind foot, and I went, I was standing there looking at it, and I kind of rocked back on my heels. I thought, well, I'm not giving them enough to stand on, because when they load up in that soft ground, sometimes they kick back. So I didn't go crazy and put a lot of leverage back there, but I put just a little bit bigger shoe, a little more of a platform at the heel, and it really worked. And the girls started doing better and avoided the body workers at the end. I don't know how many of you, some of you are probably old enough to remember when every horse you worked on, the vet said it was navicular. And then it got to be every horse you worked on had had to have a sacrum injection. And now it's all negative palmar and plantar angles. I mean, every day we hear that. And it's always about breakover. I wrote an article 20-some years ago, and in the article I said, jump off the breakover bandwagon before you fall down and hurt yourself. Because there's so much more going on in that foot besides breakover. And Dr. Noel Mueller from Dahl did a really interesting study. And the first hour was all mathematics and physics, and we all had our eyes rolling around. Somebody in the back of the room raised their hand and they said, we're horseshoers, not mathematicians, we speak English. But he did a study on breakover. He felt like it started at the knee, and that we were messing up the feet by backing up the toes too much. And he had a very unpopular opinion amongst the veterinary community because nobody was going to buy that. But shoe and hind feet, if you reduce the amount of time that that toe is in the ground, you reduce the amount of purchase or the amount of friction. So it takes more to propel that horse forward. And when he gets to it, he says, a 1,000-pound horse traveling from 1 meter to 2 meters per second, decreasing the time allowed for force from a half second to 0.4 to 0.3, requires 20 to 40% more musculature to propel that body. So he's taking a 3-day event, for example, and I was lucky enough to get invited to the Rolex one year, and I watched these horses in the cross-country jumping, and that was before the jumps fell down. They were just solid. And they were just whacking their feet on the back end. And I wanted to see how they were shod because I had this article in my truck. And most of them had their own farriers and they kind of hid in the corner, but several of them let me pick up hind feet. And I won't tell you what kind of shoe they had on because that would be unprofessional. But it was a bull toe, clipped, burned back, nailed on, every single one of them. And they were getting tired. They couldn't hold on to the ground long enough to move forward. And so that made this make a whole lot more sense to me because these were working horses at the top level of the game and they just couldn't get a hold of the ground long enough and strong enough to propel. Average impulse is a product of two factors: the average force the horse's hoof exerts on the ground and the interval of time this force is applied. So for a given horse, you shorten the time allowed for the application of force, meaning foot comes out of the ground or slips. The horse must increase the force it exerts, in this case, muscular exertion. So they get tired. 3-day event horse, they, as you know, do 3 events and they go real hard. Newton's third law for every action is an equal and opposite reaction. Now I always get a little bit of the physics with my class at the college, but I always admit that I was a pre-vet student and I took chemistry and physics and biology at the same semester. It was during the summer when I wanted to go fishing, so I didn't really do all that well, and I never did apply for vet school. But this is a prime example, and this one broke my heart. This was a really, really lovely hunter, and he was in my barn, and he ended up being the young hunter of the year, I think is what the title was. They traveled this horse all over the United States, and he left my barn and went down to Thermal. And for those of you, probably most of you do jumpers and know what Thermal is. It's our version of West Palm in California. It's a 9 or 10 week show. They go down there and spend a gazillion dollars. And over the years, most of my clients either go the first section, the middle section, or the last section. Not very many of them stay. And me personally, I try and avoid horse shows like the plague. I just don't like going. I've done it. I used to travel with them, and then when they got bigger showgrounds close to where I live, a lot of the horses didn't travel. But this horse got shod at Thermal by supposedly one of the best shooters in California and came back like this, sore-footed. Well, you can imagine what balance like. Now, it is the same horse. It looks different because they painted the foot with something. And right after they brought the horse back, it had been shot a week prior to this, and it was sore. And they was getting ready to get on the truck and go to New York. And she said, will you check the shoes and make sure they're tight? And I looked at that and I said, I can't let this horse get on the trailer like that. So we started over and did that, and then they painted it black. But I see a lot of that. You know, if you're on social media at all, people are always posting pictures and picking other farriers apart. And I don't do that because you don't see that horse through those eyes. But this horse I knew stands very quiet. If you were to look up the perfect shaped foot in the dictionary, that's what you'd get. And I took my journeyman certification The examiner said, I ought to take points away because you hardly have to hit those shoes with a hammer to get them fit. That was this horse. This is when we got in a new barn recently, and that's what we took off. And you can see that's not at all what that foot looks like. And the foot, I don't know why I'm pointing because you can't see it, but you can see on the bare foot how the hoof wall is starting to migrate to match that big bold toe. And this horse was lame, had been for some time, and all it took was a decent balanced foot. And balance is kind of speculative. Everybody has their own opinion of what that is. And I don't know if I could really define it. I know what I see and I know it works for me. But real simple shoeing job brought that horse back to work. This one I put in because this was my former apprentice got a call from a woman who had 15 horses. They had just been shod a few days prior, and obviously they were really lame. So they called my former helper, who was very competent. He pulled the shoe off, he took that picture, and he said, what in the world am I going to do with this? You look where those nails are. The wall is completely rasped off. All the nails are inside the white line, and this thing stood there like this. Fortunately, it had just happened, so he didn't have to deal with an abscess, and he ended up gluing the shoe on, and he's done it 3 or 4 times now, and he's actually got some foot, actually glued some wall. That's a prime example of fitting the shoe to the foot rather than the other way around. This is another one that I just started doing. He's a big, kind of a warm blood looking mutt. He's a trail horse. And you know, most of the time side bones don't cause too much problem unless they get really long and they break over, or if they hook in and they touch. Now you know every time the horse takes a step, that short pastern goes down between those side bones. And in this case, going to one direction, he had a little hitch in his gun lung because it was touching and it hurt. And I put on an Omni and a leather pad. I apologize for that dirty picture. I thought about taking the picture after they turned the horse out, so I ran out of the field to catch him. But I've done him 3 times, same setup. He's sound on the trail, and that's all he's ever going to do. I mean, he's functionally sound. He's got a good life with a really nice owner that loves him and takes good care of him, and his feet don't hurt anymore. And it was a really simple modification to keep him going. This is another one that, so I'll tell you a story about this horse. His name was Calvin. He was an Irish sport horse, and the trainer that I used to work for, he liked to take his clients to Europe with a checkbook. I always told him, I said, you know, we have good horses here. You go to Europe, they're not going to sell you the good stuff because they want to beat you, right? So they spent 6 figures on this horse. He went from Ireland to the Netherlands to Los Angeles, and then back up to Northern California where I was. And he was sore on all 4 feet, and they called it shipping fever. And the vet wanted me to put Polyflex. Are you familiar with those? It's a good product. I work at several vet clinics, and every vet that I work for has a thing they like. It's either EasyCare or Polyflex or Kona. None of them like nails anymore, so I do a lot of glue on shoes. In this particular case, I talked to the vet. I said, a direct glue on the bottom of a sore foot doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, how about if we do an indirect glue on the side, because that glue is going to get hard and that's going to be walking up. No, I want these. But it worked. He was right. I didn't argue with him, but I presented my case, which I often do. Most of the time they listen, but not always. So we did Polyflex, and this horse, you know, on an indirect glue, if they wiggle too much, you got to start over. No sedation. He would lean his butt against the back wall, and he'd stand there. He was a really special horse. So he gets over that, he's in steel shoes, they start showing him, he's doing great. And unbeknownst to the owner, the trainer lets a new prospective student get on this woman's 6-figure horse, and she crashes into a jump, and his stifle explodes. I mean, he needs major surgery at that point. And the woman that owned him was a small animal veterinarian, and she was devastated. There was threats and lawsuits. I don't know if any of that ever happened. I try to keep my head down and my mouth shut, so I don't know how that worked out. But he ended up in a barn a long ways from me that I don't go to, in a They called it the therapy pen. He just walked around with another cripple, and they did a little bit of trail riding. So she sends me these pictures, and she said, I think we're in trouble. No kidding, you're in trouble. I mean, look at the back half, that foot's falling off that shoe. And the foot's coming apart completely. And she said, I know it's way out of your territory, but will you help me? Well, for this horse, I drive to Colorado to see him. He's just a really special guy. And I hadn't seen him in well over a year. And they get to the therapy pin, and he comes walking over the fence. So, I mean, that was just bad work. It was just bad shoeing. That's a Myron McLean pad and a steel shoe. And eventually that corner came off completely, as it would. I tried not to help it too much because it was still fairly well attached, but he came back around. He never got in the jump there. Yes.
Looks like you floated that heel too?
I did, yes. And that's another thing. We're going to look at a quarter crack later, and that's where we're going to talk about doing that. But yeah, I floated that heel to keep the pressure off of it. And this one, this was a barrel horse with a quarter crack. So when I met this horse, you can see these feet here. He's very competitive, and I mean, this horse is so powerful. But look at that quarter crack. He was 6 years old. She'd been running him for 3 years. His angles were all screwed up. But look at that. I mean, I wish I had a picture of him with a shoe on, but he was shod to that. Those heels folded over. Way too small a shoe. That's not blood. That's Play-Doh. But I gutted that whole quarter. It's been years since I've actually stitched or stapled one, and that was just glue on there from the last person that tried to patch it. They got hinges from the hardware store, screwed them in, they drilled them and did him with stainless steel wire, and he'd bleed. It just never got it. But they didn't address the reason why it had to crack. They didn't address the fact that his digital cushion was toast. I mean, you could squeeze that much and it was just gone, squirting out the back of his foot. And his heels were way far forward and folded over. And rather than getting back to straight horn tubules, they just put a shoe right on those bent horn tubules. That just exacerbated the problem. In 3 years, this is one double-tough sucker. He'd come off the course with blood coming out of his foot, and he never took a lame step. He was just big and mean, but he was really good at his job. So I put this on him, and that's Hawthorne's, or not Hawthorne's, VetTech, the Soul Guard stuff. I did that, and honestly, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was winging it. And I used to compete a little bit, but I was never an open class guy. I put on a lot of hard bars. I love those shoes, but I buy them. I can modify them. It'd take me all day to build one that actually fit, but I made that one, and he competed in that shoe and did quite well. And then this is 15 weeks. The crack's starting to come back. He's still not at an angle that I like, but notice how much his heels had opened up. He was getting ready to go to Texas, and I was terrified. Going to go to a rodeo in Texas, and I thought, one of those rodeo horseshoers, if he loses one of these shoes, his eyes are going to roll back in his head. He's not going to know what to do with that, typically. And it wasn't being judgmental. It's just I used to work at a lot of rodeos, so I know. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna glue. We called them Sigafu shoes back then. They're called, what do they call them?
Sound horse?
Sound horse, yes. Sound horse technology with the cuffs. And we really didn't have a lot of options in those days for gluing shoes, but I put on quite a few of those, and they worked. I did find that covering the entire foot with fabric after 3 or 4 times, the hoof wall would get a little kind of scratch the surface. So any horses that the vets wanted those on for a long period of time, I'd always try and give them a break after 2 or 3 go-arounds. But I put sound horse shoes on this guy and sent him off to Texas. And I was riding, and some of the guys back there, they'd never seen anything like that, so he created quite a crowd. But I'll show you what I did to float that. I kept floating that crack. Sorry, this thing's going slow. I talk faster than this thing goes. There we go. Okay, where that's blue Play-Doh, I still floated that foot, and I was going to pour in a pad, but I didn't want the pad material to go under there and cause any kind of pressure on that crack that I've worked so hard to heal. And I did another one time. I wish I had slides of this one. This big jumper, he had white line disease, and we resected probably at least a third, maybe more, of both his front feet. He never went lame. He'd always go. And I'd sand it, clean it, and I'd leave it open for as long as I could, because in shooting with a fungus, his biggest enemy is oxygen. And I'd cover it, and he'd go show, and then he'd come back, and I'd take it off again. One time I put one of these shoes on, I drilled a hole in it, and I put a little grommet in there, and I gave them some white lightning gel, and the grommet had a little, and I made this up as I went along. They popped the little grommet off, they squirt white lightning gel in there every few days, and they put the little grommet back on. And he came back to me, and we finally got foot all the way to the ground, and he switched trainers and switched farms. And I get him back a year later, and I had to start on completely. And that just, he was another interesting one. I went to help a friend of mine at a rescue barn, which you can't throw a dead cat in California and not see a rescue barn. I'm not sure what they're rescuing them from, but most of them you need to say goodbye to because they're struggling. But he's in the back end of 5 acres, and he perks up and he runs right to the fence, and I hadn't seen that horse in years. And I worked hard on him for a long time. But anyway, back to this guy. I go down rabbit holes, yes.
How do you keep the dirt out of there when you pull the Play-Doh out and you got the float?
I'll show you.
They'll come back with dirt, right?
Yep, I covered it.
Oh, you
Yeah, I floated in with Solgar.
do. Okay, but then they come back and they're all full of dirt, right?
Now this one doesn't. The Solgar adheres to the sole.
Right,
Nothing.
but the floated part doesn't.
Oh, it had the cuff on the outside. Yeah,
Okay, so
the
it's sealed
glue-
off on 2 sides.
Yeah, the cuff went all the way around the foot, and so it was covered. It was protected from the outside. And I put the Play-Doh in there, so when I put the pouring pad in, it wouldn't go underneath it. And it actually worked. He went to Texas and he smoked. He went really good. And once he got home, he won the California Circuit Finals. He was a magnificent mover. And this is 8 months. And notice how Mr. Skeels are triple the width. I mean, you could barely get your thumb between his heels when it started. And I ended up, I put a little 2-degree rim pad and a heart bar on it. And I'm going to talk about rim pads here in a minute. You can see what we started with and how we ended up. You guys use rim pads? Like them? Yes, no?
Rarely.
I can't wrap my head around them. I used to because we all did. And I work with a lot of vet clinics, like I said, and I was working with the vet who I just got along with really well. And we were working on a horse together, and she said, I want a rim pad. And I said, why? Well, I want to see the bottom of their foot. And I said, okay, well, why a pad at all? Well, just do it. I'm not trying to be adversarial here, but if you're going to tell me it absorbs shock, show me some science. Prove it. What's it going to be made of? Leather rim pad, poly, plastic? What? Tell me why a rim pad is going to help this horse. It's going to lift his foot up off the ground farther. And she got really angry. And she stomped and she said, fine, you want to do it your way, you're responsible for the outcome. I was a little mortified because I have a really good relationship with the vets, and I don't argue at all. I question everything, but I don't argue. And she walked down the arm. And I'm standing there befuddled, wondering what to do. The owner walked over. She goes, I heard that, and I trust you. You do it your way. So I did. Yeah, I don't work with that vet anymore. She doesn't like me. That's okay.
You don't want them all.
No, you can't. No, I lost that one big time. Next one. Now, you all know Dr. Parks, right? I've done he's at the University of Georgia, and I've got it, 2006, Dr. O'Grady started the Vet Farrier short course is what they call it then. Now they call it the podiatry clinic or whatever, but I've been doing those clinics for 20 years. Someone asked me recently, how long have you been doing that? I don't know, 10 or 12 years, I think. I was getting ready to go see Dr. Parks for the second time, and I found my original on a DVD, and it was 2006. I've been doing that, I'm old now, so I forget things, so I forgot when I actually started that. But he did a program called the Glass Horse, so I just got a little bit of it here. It's a very lengthy program. It doesn't really work on an Apple computer, It's not even available anymore. I bought it when it first came out because the illustrations were really interesting. But talks about ground force reaction and the center of rotation. If you ever listen to Mike Savaldi, I'm sure you all know him, he talks about how the foot rotates over the center of rotation, or center of pressure, sorry. And so Dr. Parks did these illustrations, and he talks about how the load is shared. And in this particular case, it's a barefoot horse on soft ground. So you see that the load gets taken up by pretty much the entire bottom of the foot. And then we put a shoe on there, we lift that foot up off the ground, and the load goes up the hoof wall, and it's borne by the ligaments. Did anybody know Stuart Greenberg? Anybody know Stuart? Stuart passed away. He was the Farrier instructor at Santa Rosa Junior College where I teach, and he was a very good friend of mine. He did it for 32 or 33 years, and he passed away about 5 years ago. And I subbed for him for 15 years at least, but he always talked about the hoof. He called it the box. Inside that box is a hammock, and or a trampoline. And he talks about how everything moves inside that box. And this kind of illustrates that, how the ligaments attach everything to the hoof wall, and where the load is borne on a shod horse on hard footing. And this is kind of a good illustration as to why frog support's a good idea. And this is a good argument for the barefoot community, other than the fact that they can't all do it. Did anybody watch, oh shoot, what's his name? The Barefoot Guru. I can't remember his name. He came to lecture at, I think it was in Tulsa, the AFA convention. I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. They invited him into enemy territory. They're going to eat him alive. There's probably 500 or 600 shooters. I go, oh, but watch this. And he get Pete Rainey. He wrote the book, and he, at the time you could take a Pete Rainey weekend clinic and be a certified barefoot trainer. California's full of them. I mean, they run over all the time. But he gets up on the podium, and everybody's staring at him. And he said, before I stop, I owe everyone in this room an apology. He said, I wrote a book. It got published, and I can't unwrite it. He said, I shoot horses. I went, wow. And the whole mood in the room, because they were in there for blood, I think. And he gave a really, really good lecture. And he talked about it, his shoeing practice. He said, as you all know, not every horse can do their job perfect. And he said, it's pretty obvious. And he said, I put on a lot of shoes. He said, I use glue-ons mostly, not because I have a problem with nails or steel or aluminum. That's just my preference. That's just the way I do it. But I shoot horses. And then we got on his lecture there. It was pretty good. And this little illustration talks about how much the foot expands and contracts under load. And I've seen several videos, slow motion videos. Chris Pollitt did one where he loaded the foot, and you can see how much it actually moves. And then this shows how little it actually moves when we put nails in it. Now we've all learned from day one of shoeing school, you don't want to put nails past the widest part of the foot if you can get away with it. I'm not afraid of it if I have to do it, and I do sometimes. I try not to. Most of the horses I shoe are clipped, and I very rarely use more than 4 nails. I was just talking with Jason. There's a big thing going in California where they use 2 nails per side right behind the clip. And to me that creates a teeter-totter, right? And half the time the nails aren't high enough and they're bent over right by the clip, so you know what's going to happen when the shoe comes off. Half the foot's going to go in. I see them coming from horse shows that way constantly. And I ask people that I know that do that, why? They can't really tell me, but just somebody showed it to them and they thought it was cool. It scares me. I like that space between the nails. But anyway, this illustrates how much constriction there is. Anytime you put an appliance on a shoe, I don't care what it is. It's a boot, it's the glue on, a nail, whatever. You compromise something. But these horses have to do their job, and it's a $220 billion industry. So every time the gate opens, think about who makes money. The guy opening the gate, the announcer, the grooms, the farriers, the veterinarians, the dentists. In California, the horse psychics. A lot of those. Do you? I gotta tell you a story. Another rabbit hole, this is funny. So I get this horse right off the boat from Germany. Beautiful horse. They call the horse psychic out to talk to him. He doesn't like the brown horse. He doesn't like this, he doesn't like that. And I'm taking all this in. I grew up in rural eastern Washington, and I said, do you speak German? She said, no, why? And I said, he does. How are you talking to him? I got fired. I've been fired twice for silly comments about psychics. Not because I was rude, just because I was curious. I had this woman one time, these people have more money than brains. They have a whole bunch of cutters. They'd send them 6 or 7 of them to Bobby Allen every year. Almost every one of them had a clubfoot, because they had all major bonanza bears. I don't know if you work with those or not, but they're like this. And you don't want, the guy that used to show them was a high school buddy of mine. He goes, I can't take these people anymore. Will you take over? You're more patient than me, but don't say clubfoot. I go, right, he goes, because they will fire you. And I said, are they clubfooted? He goes, every damn one. So the daughter who ran the place, she had this old mare that had a caved-in cheekbone from when she was a baby. Her mother stepped on her face, and she was an old mare. She was the first horse they ever had. And I'm shooting her. She goes, tell her she's pretty. I said, what? Tell her she's pretty. I said, she's pretty. What? She goes, come here. Didn't want to talk in front of horse. The psychic came out and said she's embarrassed about that divot in her face. And we need to constantly remind her that she's pretty. Like you guys, I started laughing and I got fired. But it was kind of worth getting fired.
We've got one that doesn't even have to come out. She can do it from wherever she's at.
Oh, yeah, no. This cowboy buddy of mine, there's not too many people to mentor where I came from. And there's one guy, I mean, this is straight up cowboys. Just a beautiful guy. Took me to my very first clinic ever. It was Bob Scrazio. We drove 6 hours down to Oregon. And, but this guy, he wears his hat, he had his cuffs down to here, button up to here, shoot a horse, hardly ever talked. Great sense of humor once you got to know him, but it was really dry. He'd roll up his cuffs, he'd wash his hands, and put them back down. And we were working one time, and he had 3 horses and a pony. And the woman comes with a checkbook, and she says, well, John, you're not going to charge me the same for that pony as you do the horse. He didn't say nothing. He finished to wash his hands with her mail. It wouldn't seem hard and fair to charge him more, would it? But he had this horse. Back years ago, somebody had the bright idea that every horse was a sinker. You remember that? Anybody old enough to remember that era? I hope you missed it, but it was real popular in those days to take the wall off and have them walk on their sole. Well, that hurts, right? I mean, you don't even want to put a shoe on the sole because that hurts. But he had his wife's roping horse, cute little paint horse. He cut the wall off and the thing laid down. And so he was going to put it down. So he calls this horse psychic on the phone. She says, lay the phone on the kitchen table and point it to the pasture. So he does. And the horse out there laying, and it gets up and walks away. And he's convinced that it worked. And so he decides, this is an old cowboy. I don't know where this came from in his head, but he's convinced that that worked. But then the horse got sore and they got again. And he said, well, we're going to put her down. Well, we had a mutual friend who was also a client of mine, and she said, what do you think of that horse? I said, I think it's a great horse, just needs shoes. But he's one of my mentors, and I told him that, but he wasn't buying it. She said, well, he told me if I wanted it, he'd give it to me. And I said, take it, if you don't want it. So she goes and gets it. They live 2 hours from each other. She brings it home, I go up, things barely stand, puts shoes on it, takes off across an entire section of the wheat field, sound as could be, with just shoes. Anyway, that was another horse psychic. And they called it dowsing. I don't know where that came from, but they put the phone on and they telecommunicate. And this woman, apparently, according to him, she's a veterinarian, but she wasn't allowed to practice anywhere other than Oregon. I live in Oregon, and there's a lot of weirdos in Oregon too, but a lot more in California. So this is one of the reasons that I don't like ring pads. This is done by Monique Craig and a opponent of mine. They used to do clinics every year, and I've been to a bunch of them. They put opponent shoes on everything, and I have some because one of the vets likes them. And you can grind them and make them do anything you want. So I have no problem with the product, but this fascinated me. She's really good, and this illustrates. I'm great. There it is. Under load, you can see the barefoot with no packing, notice how much that coffin bone moves. It's trying to find the ground. And I thought this was cool, a video of an x-ray. I'm not sure how they did that, but they pulled it out. And then you can see how much movement. Now they put packing in and notice how stable that footfall is. Every time that foot hits the ground, the coffin bone's trying to find the ground. So we lift it up with a shoe, and then we add a rim pad to that. You've got a gap this big, and that foot is still trying to find the ground, which doesn't really cause a problem if you're in soft dirt, but they don't always live in soft dirt, and they very rarely work that way. So, every time I use a pad, I use packing. This happens to be our product. 35 durometer, we have a 20 durometer coming. We stayed with earth colors, which they'd already done that before I joined the company, but I have a story about that too. I had a hunter trainer that wanted green impact pads. And he's a great guy, little gay guy, very gay guy. And back then, everything came out with that purple silicone. And so I had green pads and purple silicone. He lost his mind. So I thought you of all people would like purple and green, but he didn't. So he tolerated it for one show. Yes?
So, I was just going to ask, like, I use that silicone a lot, but after that picture, I'm kind of wondering if it's, like, firm enough it's trying to find the sole. What are your thoughts on that?
It is. The 35 durometer is really stiff. Mike Savaldi uses 40 durometer, but I don't know if you know Mike or not. I've got some of his slides too. And we had some interesting conversations, and so I'm going to share some things that I don't totally understand, but there were some things I got from him that I think you'll find interesting. But good story about Mike. He would come, and he always starts his lecture by saying, I'm not here to change the way you shoe horses. I'm here to change the way you look at feet. And he was at Cal Poly Pomona for 35 years. And he was responsible for the Kellogg Arabian herd. I don't know if you know the history because you're in Colorado and California, but the Kellogg family, huge Arab breeders way back in the day, they donated the land to California for the university, but the caveat was maintain the Arab program. And so Mike Savaldi, they say, has dissected more feet than anybody on the planet. He's retired now, and he's still got buckets full of bones in his yard. I get him up to my class every once in a while to do a dissection demonstration, and then I turn my students loose and we tear apart legs. It's funny, every year I get one or two who go, that's gross, I'm not touching that. Maybe a little closer. And I always tell them, this won't affect your grade at all. If you don't want to do it, here's some Vicks for your nose, go sit on a bale of hay. Without fail, 100% of them, they're elbow deep in cadavers and they want to take bones home and boil them. But yeah, now Mike puts, he always talked about it takes him about 4 days to shoe a horse. I trim it, let it settle, trim it, let it settle. I don't know if any of you have done this. I've done it a few times where you get a new horse and part of the corner of your guy is really jammed up in the ankles. You can kind of relieve that and do the other 3 feet. If they're standing on a flat ground and it's settled. And so Mike takes 4 days to trim the leather, let it settle, trim the leather, let it settle. And after 4 days, he figures it's where it's going to be. And he puts frog pads and putty on everything, and he puts shoes on because he believes lifting the foot up off the ground needs support. But when he leaves, everybody listens to the first part of the lecture and doesn't listen to most of it. And they put so much putty in there that it's convex instead of concave. And so it puts a lot of pressure on the bottom of that foot. And I used to get tons of calls from vets saying, hey, so-and-so's horse is really lame, and it'd be a bubble. And I cut the pad off, you barely touch the frog with your thumb and it hurt him. And in a day, exposed to the air, the frog dries up, the foot goes fine. So when we put impression material on, now the Kahn shoes come wrapped in wax paper, and I always keep the wax paper they come in. This is my helper, Savannah. Fill up the commissures, and if it's got some concavity in the sole, we fill it up, and we put that wax paper on it, then we let it settle before I ever get close to it with a shoe. Let it settle completely, because I want support, but I don't want pressure. Same thing with heart bars. When I first started shoeing 36 years ago, heart bars, the frog plate would be bent up. And most of the horses lay down and put their sore feet up in there, and then we figured out that was too much. And the same thing, I've seen the same thing happen with impression material, so that's after it's set up. And it stays, it's firm, and it provides good support. Now I use mostly leather. Occasionally I'll use a urethane pad or plastic pad if somebody wants it, but if it's up to me, I just use leather. The reason I like leather is when it gets wet, foot's wet. When it gets dry, the foot's dry. Get those plastic pads, a lot of times they get wet and soggy up there. We have a lot of rain in the wintertime in Northern California, and it just creates havoc. That leather pad gets soaking wet, you put the horse back in the stall for the night, and on the pine shavings, the foot gets dry. Now, if I get in trouble with a veterinarian that insists on a rim pad, I'll put one of these on, because it's rim enough that they can see the bottom of the foot, but it puts frog support in there, so I don't feel like I'm compromising the health and well-being of this horse. This is one that Laura Gillespie, she's on our sales team, when she did, it's a Kahn certifier with one of Austin Eden's plexus pads. And when I use frog support pads, I use quite a few of these. But that gets me out of trouble. Now, if you absolutely had to, you could trim those little things off of there, and it makes it even more look like a rim pad, and it works. But I've never had a vet argue with me when I put that on and ask for a rim pad. So I don't know if it's because they don't understand it or they just don't know to ask, but I get away with it. So this is an interesting study. This horse was in Montana at the Chief Joseph ride. And a lot of people have got mad at me because I saved him Appaloosa's life, but when I was a kid, that was my favorite horse. But it was tied to a trailer, got kicked in the elbow, had an open fracture with electric non-processed, synovial fluid dripping down the leg. So the vet in Montana, they call him, he comes out, and he says, I'm going to take this horse back to my clinic. Now, this vet didn't know this woman at all. And he said, tell you what, I'll take your horse, you come and get mine, finish your ride, and we'll hook up when you're done. Now, that guy loaned this woman that he didn't know his horse. I thought that was pretty cool. So he does an x-ray, figures out the elbow's broken. They ship it from Montana all the way to Pullman, Washington, to Washington State University, and they put a plate and screws in the elbow. And they said, now the horse is full weight bearing on the other foot, probably going to get laminitis, so talk to your farrier. And she went, didn't know what they were talking about. I was really disappointed that they did nothing to the other foot to support that. He gets back in the trailer, 4.5 hour ride back to where she lived, gets out of the trailer, and there's dead laying on the good side. Now, the broken elbow side's doing pretty good, but now can't walk on the other side. So her farrier, nice guy, didn't really understand what to do. Put a backwards shoe and a little really thin, I think they call them thin, a little thin flat pad. And by the time I saw the horse, you could take the hoof capsule and move it this much. And there was no research that I could find of anybody that had saved one. And I said, you gotta put it down. So my vet that I work for, he said, no way, let's put it down. 2 other vets in my area, they both said no. Called Washington State University, and they said, absolutely not, put it down. So she calls me, she says, come up and look at it. She had sent me radiographs. I go up there, and this cranky old mare standing in the middle of the field with 1 foot up in there, fighting everybody for her hay. She wasn't ready to die yet. She was too big. So my vet, where she lived was 4-wheel drive and chains to get to her house. She lived up on top of a mountain pass. Luckily, it wasn't wintertime. So we go up there, and I said, just look at her. So and he's laughing at me. We go up, and he goes, all right. She brings her to town, and we can put her in a stable where we can get access to her and check on her. We'll try it. So she said, all right. So she brings the horse down. We start looking at her. She breaks her arm. So guess who goes to deal with this damn horse every day? The vet and I. And so we literally, the hoof capsule was completely detached. And somebody had given her this recipe for an old Indian remedy, she called it. That was she's 10 years old. That was the first x-ray I saw. Not much coffin bone left. And it looks like it's about to pop through. And this is before I ever met the horse. And she painted this yellow stuff on it that was supposed to cure it from the inside out. That was walking across the parking lot to get into the vet clinic. coffin bone just said hello to the state of Washington. I put a heart bar on the other foot. Back then, the frog support pads we had weren't really shaped like frogs. They were thick and kind of crude, and the frog plate at the back was really wide and didn't really fit between the wheels very well. She had to do a lot of grinding and a lot of modifying, but that's all we had at that point. And so I put those on the back feet. You can see that red, that's all corner again. It's an inch thick. It is completely prolapsed. The heels, you can see that yellow stuff, that's that eye of newt, wing of bat nonsense that she painted on there. And it actually got behind the hoof wall, and it just filled in. And so, the veterinarian, lovely man, hands me a cast saw, says, have fun. So this is surgery, this is your department. He goes, no. And so I started taking the hoof wall out. I was taking it apart in chunks, and scared the hell out of me, to be honest with you. You can see the mess I made. So one image well anyway, the one where she's standing, not the bloody one, the other one, I left about that much at each side. And I only did it because I was afraid to take it off. It wasn't really attached at the bottom or the top, but it was kind of stuck in the middle. And I was scared to death to take the entire thing off. Ultimately I did, but at this point we damaged that foot, and that corner again is still this thick. It's sticking right up front. And we thought, there's no way hell we're going to fix this horse. We didn't have the products in that we have now. Equilox was around, and they were experimenting with a time-release medication. And so we thought, well, it wasn't available if they were studying it. So the vet called, whoever makes that stuff, and talked to him about what kind of medication they were putting in it. And so he mixed up, and it was a good idea, but it didn't really adhere like it should. So they never did come out with it, I don't think. But we tried it, and it didn't work. And so I can't remember what we had. We had Bond and Flex and Boat Putty and all kinds of stuff we put on there. And we built her a shoe, or built her a hoof, and put a aluminum shoe on the bottom. And back then, Castle Plastic had little black triangles, little frogs. And so I stuck one of those in there. And you can see that is an entire synthetic foot. And we had good days and bad days. You know, that sensitive tissue would get on that hard glue, and we have to dribble it out a little bit to give us some relief. And this was about 2 months, and you can see most of that plastic stuff in her frog has started to come back. And she's got a little bit of sole growth on either side of that frog. The rest was plastic. But this is 6 months, and she's still got some damage at the toe. But the foot, we put her on Farrier's, the vet clinic, or anything we had to work on her foot, they put her on Farrier's form the day they walked in the door. 9 months, I was able to nail a heart bar on this horse. And so she was getting around really well. I mean, her coffin bone was obviously not there, but she was too mean to be very lame. And they lived about a mile from their mailbox, and they would use her to go get their mail. They'd ride her down there. And she called her Foundation Stock Appaloosa. I didn't know there was such thing, but she said, can I breed her? And I go, man, I wouldn't. All she's been through, the hormones, the weight, the stress, you're going to end up in trouble. So they called all the same vets that told her to put the horse down, and they all said, absolutely not. She finally gets a hold of this vet that says, I don't know, try it. So she does. And it probably resolved the fetus within 60 days. I mean, it was a complete and total disaster. So they gave her a couple years off. And then they started breeding. She was 10 at the time, and this was the first baby she had after I worked on her. Well, then I moved to California, and I get a call probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago from a farrier friend of mine who says, do you remember that horse Kahn? I said, of course, that was my 15 minutes of fame. That's how we ended up in California. He said, I just trimmed her. And I said, sure, what? She was 33. And I said, she's still mean and nasty? And he goes, absolutely. They would holler to the vet clinic after she was over this, and I'd be shooing her, and she'd be going backwards, and I'd be going with her. And I'd look, both the vets and the receptionists were in the window laughing and pointing and waving at me, and watching me suffer until they come out and drug her. She was just cranky, but I think that's why she lived. When she was not sedated when I was cutting her foot off. She just sat there and grimaced, and she stood on that bad foot and let me put a heart bar on the other foot. She was a case. So I wrote an article in the journal, and Dr. Redden, with utmost respect, he's so far out of the box, I think if you can find a middle ground, you can learn something from him, but he called me, and he said, I want you to come and speak at the laminitis symposium. And I was mortified. I said, Dr. Redden, I've read everything you said about heart bar shoes, and that's what I put on this horse. Because I don't care what you did at work, unless you come talk about it. I get there, and I mean, you guys scared me a little bit. That scared me a lot. There was 300 or 400 people, and they're all big Redden advocates. And I said, well, full disclosure, this case study is about heart bars. And they all kind of grumbled. Dr. Redden was at the very back of the auditorium. He comes trotting up and he gets up on stage, he puts his arm around me, he goes, all right, y'all. He said, it's not the appliance, it's the application that I have a problem with. And this boy knows how to do it, so you be nice, do this. I did my thing, and I'm in the airport, and I'm having a cup of coffee, waiting for a plane. This guy walks up and goes, heart bar, huh? I said, yeah. He said, not me. Wouldn't know how to put one on if I had to. I said, I only use natural balance shoes. Good for you. Good luck with that. I don't have a problem with those either if that's what you use, but I don't know why he decided to say that. But I ended up meeting him a few years later. He lives in California, and he's still putting on natural balance shoes. So this is, I shared this, and I don't totally understand it, but I wanted to show it to you. I talked to for a long time, and this all started with the laminitis symposium with Dr. Redden, the banana shoe, and the rock and roll rail shoe, and all this stuff. And I met Gene over there. Gosh, I was right out of shoe school, and he was taking a Venters and cutting the tine off of the rasp and nailing them at the heel on the inside of the branch, and that was his rail shoe. And I still can't totally wrap my head around that. I've never done it, but I asked Mike, I said, you know, there's guys up where down in California I live, that they kind of banana everything, front and hind. And I was standing next to a guy, very well-respected farrier, retired now, with the horses doing this on the concrete. And I'm watching it. The extensor will pop, and the flexor will pop, and the extensor will. Horse could not find a place to stand that was comfortable. Now I get it, if they're in soft ground, maybe there's some benefit to that. And then a really good friend of mine, he's a Kiwi, he moved back to New Zealand and he hooked up with a woman in Switzerland. So 6 months a year he goes to Switzerland and works in a vet clinic. And he said they haven't put a flat shoe on a horse in 10 years. So I asked Mike, I said, and the reason I asked him this is my first years out of shoe school, I worked with BC Interior at the racetracks. And that was when World Race Plate first came out. And I thought, well, that's the coolest thing since peanut butter. I want to try that. And I put it on my own horse because she traveled with me and she ran. Real quarter horse. She 13 starts and 13 checks as a 2-year-old. Still didn't make a dime on it. I brought her home and I'd had her in World Race Place for a while. And we didn't have cross ties when I did. We used to have rings on the side of the barn, so I hooked up. And I looked down, and her cornering band had corners. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but the whole shape of the foot changed. The front of the cornering band was flat, and then there was a corner to match that damn shoe I put on. And again, if that's what you do, is I'm not making disparaging comments about your ideas. Did not work for me. I was scared. I took them off. I turned her out on 300 acres for a couple of months and let her foot come back. So I asked Mike, I said, this whole banana shoe or banana trim thing, does that have any effect on the inside of the foot? And he said, I will get back to you on that. I said, I'm doing some studies on that. So I remember he saw these Kellogg horses from birth to death, x-rays their entire life, and they dissected them and studied them. And he started seeing horses come in with these things, and so he started taking the feet apart. And he said that the solar plane starts to match the trim. And he said people that overuse rocker toes, the solar plane has a kink in it where the rocker toe was. And he said, so if you make adjustments where you need something like that, he said, do it on the shoe, not on the foot, because you will change the inside of the foot. And then we got to talking about what we mentioned earlier. Every horse that you look at now, the vet says has a negative palmar or plantar angle. You know, veterinarians want a 3 to 5 degree positive angle on the front feet. And he said, veterinary community is really angry with me, but he said, I've got 30 years of proof that that's a bad idea. He said, and he can show me. He said, and I'll show you. He said, you do that, and they all get P. osteitis eventually. And so I put some of these on there. Plane of the hoof capsule versus the plane of the third phalanx. I mean, we can do pretty much anything we want to the hoof capsule and make it look the way we think it's supposed to. But he focuses more on P3. And he talks a lot about the arch, which is the concavity of the foot. You know, I'm sure you all see horses with a really bold toe and no heels and no plantar cushion, and the foot's going like that because the arch is collapsed. And he's got some illustrations for that. And this is a level edge along the distal border as compared to a juvenile foot that nobody has screwed up yet. It's not positive, it's flat. And I don't know how he can accomplish this without carrying an X-ray machine, but he does it in his 4-day trim cycle by letting it settle and finding, he does what he calls uniform sole thickness. He finds where the sole and the wall come together and he just removes what's extra and finds the true. You know, I always say in shoe school, there's two things you never want to say. One is always, and one is never. But one of the things we can count on most of the time is that solar plane is going to be consistent if we know what it looks like and we know where to find it. And the one where it says P3 modeling, that's one that was at a positive angle. If you look at it from the side, it's flat in the front. And so his idea is that that's the way that horse is turned. Now, I don't know if this is a club foot or what it was, but how many of you have had a veterinarian radiograph a club foot and tell you the horse is foundered because the coffin bone's doing this? That drives me nuts. Or the hoof wall is migrated up. Pastern axis is still pretty good, but that horse is rotated 15 degrees. Not really. Anyway. In teaching the vet farrier podiatry course, it's a good start. But in 20 years, I used to get 30 or 40 students. I lived in Colorado here, which was great. But was it Colorado State or University of Colorado? Where the Buffaloes are, or the Rams.
CSU.
At the vet school, yeah. There was a shoeing shop on campus. And I probably had 30 students. I said, how many of you have visited the shoeing shop? No. None of them had ever been there, and only one student knew it was even there. I said, you guys are equine veterinary students, you need to go visit this guy. But he passed away, or they've got another program going on. Anyway, now, if I get 15 out of 400, it's an elective, and that's good. And I went to LSU. University of Georgia was different because they had one of the veterinarians is Jaime Venegas, and Brian Beasley, he's not there anymore, unfortunately, but they had a really interesting group, all really into focusing on podiatry. But I was at LSU and I said, who in here rides? I had one student. I said, who in here has ever ridden? That same student. Who in here has ever owned a horse? That one student. The rest of them had zero horsemanship experience. I was in Los Angeles teaching the class. I think Jason might have been with me. But I had this woman, she followed me around, she giggled. Everything I'd say, she'd she's driving me nuts, I gotta engage this kid. So I said, what kind of riding do you do? Well, I've never ridden a horse in my life. I said, okay, what kind of horsemanship experience do you have? And she said, when I was a little girl, my neighbor had a pony and I helped her shove a poop once. And I said, and you're about to go into your 3rd year as an equine veterinarian? She goes, yeah, isn't that funny? I said, no. That's not funny at all. That's scary. You're going to get killed. But that's what we're dealing with now because there's such a shortage of veterinarians coming in equine because they don't make any money for their first 10 years. They get out of school, they get all the scut work, they get all the late night calls, they get abused, and they quit. And their small animal colleagues are working in emergency vet clinics and charging bank, and so now they're promoting the fact that you don't have to know anything about horses when they teach you that. And that terrifies me a little bit. And most of the time when I teach that class, I say, in 1 or 2 years, it's going to say DVM behind your name. And you're going to start writing new prescriptions about things you know nothing about. So we're going to go out to the lab, and everybody's going to trim a cadaver. You're going to rasp off a knuckle. You might cut your thumb pushing your knife. You're definitely going to cramp up. Some of you are going to puke. It's going to be glorious. Let's go. I only had one throw up, and he didn't quite do it. But this kid, he was from Costa Rica, or he's from Peru, or Costa Rica. He's from Costa Rica. And great big kid. He said, I took a week-long Farrier program, so I kind of got an idea. That's okay. So it is, Louisiana is humid. And I watch him, he's walking like this. I go, are you okay, bud? He goes, you weren't kidding. My lunch is coming back. So I sat him down, gave him some water, sat in the shade, and I said, you've done enough. You get the drill. And he got up in about 20 minutes and we finished. Anyway, that's what we're dealing with angles and things. And you get researchers like Mike Savaldi, but they don't teach you that in vet school. They teach you 3 to 5 degrees and you have a positive angle. So the horizontal arch, that red line kind of illustrates the position of the arch, or the supporting structures inside the sole. And then you push it forward or you push it back, you see how that moves. Now that bottom illustration we've all seen on a hind foot, because that foot will go like this, the heels will disappear, and they'll get a big bull nose, and the toe will go clear out to Dallas, and we end up trying to get it off the bottom, and we just can't all the time. And obviously, first thing everybody wants to have you do is throw a wedge pad on there. That's a Band-Aid, I think, in my opinion. A lot of those cases, that bottom was extreme, but just a flat frog support pad can occasionally give you 2 to 3 degrees if you've got a negative palmar angle and you support the back half of that foot. That foot's a miraculous piece of equipment, and it's going to try and heal itself if you stay out of its way. And here's just another example of the same thing, how the pressure on the arch causes it to change shape. You get one like that one on the right, that's going to be really flat when you trim that. You're going to have a hard time getting some concavity with that toe because it's pushed so far forward, and the bone is pushing down against that solar plane, and everything else is moving out the back half of that foot. Mike Savaldi scares me. He's so smart. He talks over my head. But the example on the left is the hoof capsule, the gray and the red. That's the hoof capsule with the bone position inside it. And that's what we talked about in that first slide, how the arch and P3 are not necessarily the same as what we trim on the hoof capsule. And the first one, very mild remodeling, but you can see the toe is starting to demineralize. The next one is a little steeper, and that toe is disappearing. And the bottom of the toe is pretty much gone. Now this didn't happen overnight, obviously, but again, he x-rays these horses from birth to death, and he gets a lot of them coming in, not at the clinic anymore because he's retired, but like I said, he's still got buckets full of cadavers. He was telling me a story. He says, I was in my yard. He said, bloody buckets all around me. He said, I'm out there in a t-shirt and my shorts, and I'm cutting up feet, and the state patrol plane flies over this floor. And he comes back a couple times. Pretty soon the state patrol pulls in his driver. What are you doing? He said, trying to dispose of the body. Of course he did that for a fact, but then he had to scare the hell out of his cop to do what? I'm working on a horse feet, coming up. I sense of humor. This is pretty much redundant. It's kind of what we saw already. But he shows the pathology, and this is how much the bone moves. At the bottom is a perfect example of a hind foot that's failed. Call it heel failure. It just collapses. And once that digital cushion gets displaced and starts squirting out the back of the foot, I don't know that it's possible to put it back. I mean, you can salvage those horses and those feet to a point. I've got one that I just, this was lovely. This is a Frisian horse, and when I took it over, it should have been euthanized. He was so foundered that the way we trim him, we put his foot on a piece of a 2x4 and trim it this way. We push and pull. But the guy that owned him had pictures in his barn of this Frisian, this big, in a wheelbarrow, and he'd had him his whole life. And then we tried everything. We did hard bars, we did glue-ons, we did boots, but they take him out into a grassy field and you get a little perky for a minute and eat some grass. So they were always hopeful, but he had very little coffin bone left. I mean, it was probably less than half. And so, guy passed away. He took all the COVID shots, he took all the vaccines, got COVID and ended up in intensive care and it messed up his heart. So they said, well, go home. We're so backlogged on heart surgeries, we'll get to you soon. And his buddy found him unresponsive. So they hauled him to the hospital, cracked his chest, fixed his heart. He never really recovered. He died. And he willed his entire property to the young woman that took care of his horses and did his books, which was really generous, but his property is $70,000 in property taxes. And her husband couldn't work because of an injury on the job site, so she was mortified. So she calls me, and I'd given the client to my apprentice because he had, or my former apprentice, he had a client right down the street. He was way out of my area, so I said, you take care of it. So she calls me, she said, I got the vet coming out in a week. Would you come back? We're gonna see what's going on with Esteban. I said, well, of course I will. So calls me a couple of days later, she goes, that's not gonna tell us anything we don't know, is he? And I said, no, he's not. And I said, I can't tell you what to do. She said, what would you do if he was yours? And I said, I would say goodbye to him the first day I met him, but that's just me. I can't counsel you on what to do. I'm here to support you on your decision. So she calls back in tears and she said, that's kind of putting down. Will you come up? And I said, yeah, I'm going to say goodbye to him. So I'm late. I get there and he's covered in a tarp and she's laying on the tarp sobbing. And she's young and really pretty. She comes up and she's hugging me. I've never met her husband. And she's crying. She goes, that's my husband. He walks up behind me and I was holding out and I was like, hi. But through her tears, she said, would his legs benefit your class? And I said they would, and that's very brave of you if you're sure. And she said, I want to know. I said, go in the barn. So I took his legs, the rendering guy came and hauled him away, took him to my class, and we did a split him, and then we dissected him. And well, I kept one of them for next year, but it was grim. Digital cushion, clear out the back of the foot. Coffin bone was literally this big. And I mean, so much pathology. And I talk a lot about laminitis in my class, and so I was able to, and I always tell my students, the reason we're going to cut up feet is because if you don't understand what's going on the inside, it's going to be really hard for you to understand what you see on the outside. Now mind you, most of my students in this class is classroom only because they got more into viticulture and grapes than they did animal science, so they got rid of all the horses. So my wife, bless her heart, she brings mine, and I let the students work on it. They screw them up, I can fix them, so I let them do it. Most of them are just horse owners. And I start the class by saying, who are you and why are you here? Every one of them has a story. Well, I asked my farrier this or that, and he or she got mad at me. Well, I was talking to my vet said my farrier did this wrong and that wrong and this wrong. Every one of them had a story. Now, you usually get one or two that think, I might want to go to show school. And I got to brag on one of my students. She took the class, real handy horsewoman. And she rode with me a few times. And then the next year, she said, I tried to sign up, they wouldn't let me take the class because I already took it. And I said, we're out here tonight. Well, I was forgiveness, not permission. She did not miss a class in 4 years. Every time she came, she would bring her horses down so we could demo on them. She went to Chris Gregory's school for 7 months, got her CF, came back, got a full book, went back to work on her journeyman, and Chris and Cody offered her a job, so she moved to Missouri. I'm really proud of her. She's a neat kid. I'm a little sad she's gone because she worked for me whenever I get in a jam. She'd stop what she was doing and come help me. This one, I told you I was going to share success and failure, and this is a failure. This horse's name is Cyrus. He's 17. He foundered a few years back. We got him over it. I worked on this horse for 3 different owners. And I started off with hot bars. Didn't really help him too much, so that wanted me to put a clog on him. So I did. And he was getting better every day. His attitude was good. He was eating. And this is him walking in the barn. Well, I mean, he's not great, but he's better every single day. Well, then she gets Dr. Redden on the phone. That scared me a little bit. And he convinced her to put the Mega Ultimate on me. And I called him. I said, you cut the deeps when this doesn't work. He goes, yeah, I used to cut 5 or 6 a week, now I only do 1 or 2. And I said, that's not an option for this horse. This woman is not going to go for that. And he goes, he sells her, he gets measurements and x-rays, and he sells her these packages for $500+. And I know you can put them on RT, and I go, yeah, I can put them on. I have a problem with this. And my thought, and this is just me, you have a bone that rotates, and then you jack it up 30 degrees. It's like a lawn dart. It's going to punch right through the bottom of the foot. Now, I know he's had success because in his head, it puts laxity in the DDFT, which is pulling on the coffin bone, but I've never had success doing that, and I've never been able to wrap my head around it. And the vet that I was working with on this horse agreed with me 100%. And we were standing over here next to the table talking to this owner saying, let's not do this. This is premature. You're in a hurry. This is a marathon, not a sprint. This horse is viable. He's healing. The bone is still in pretty darn good shape. He's obviously got circulation. George Platt said, if there's blood, I can fix him. I don't know if you remember him or not, but this horse was getting better. And I told her, I said, I've had laminated foundered horses that sometimes it takes months and months and months. But if you're diligent, now, and I told her that too, I said, you can put everything in the truck on that foot and fed. Or you can duct tape your billfold on the bottom, and the horse is going to trot over his tail over his back. It's not a hide and watch thing, right? You put something on, it doesn't work, you got to make adjustments. That's why most people don't get into this kind of work, and that's why I thrive on it. And I'm old enough now, I'd rather get my hands and knees and work on one than stand under somebody's dink. But I have a couple of really good helpers that are certified, and so I get away with some of that stuff. But I didn't want to do this. And so here we are. That's what the package looked like when we put it together. And that just, nothing about that makes sense to me. And again, utmost respect for Dr. Will. I talked to him on the phone many times. He gets so excited about some of his inventions, but it just doesn't make sense in my head. But I'm not a vet. And so here we are. There's 4 farriers there watching. There's the horse owner. Now this is the barn where there's lots of cooks in the kitchen. And this, I mean literally, there's an outside window and there'll be 5 or 6 women looking in at this horse. So I get a call one night, late. Oh, you gotta come and look at Cyrus, he's down. I go, good, let him lay down. You can't rotate if you're laying down. And I explained that to him. Well, no, this is bad, we may need the vet. But once you look first, leave him alone, he's just laying down. All right, so I come out. He's laying there, he's got a head, just gets a wall, he's looking around, he's totally fine, he's chilling. And there's 5 or 6 women in here, there's 1 or 2 in the stall, and 2 or 3 more outside looking, holy crap, what am I gonna do? So I put a halter on him, he hops up, I walk him down to the end of the shed row, turn around, walk him back, put him in, take the halter off. Good night. So I got the same crowd here, and they always, none of them are farriers, none of them are vets, none of them, and most of them aren't that talented horse people, but you tell them something, and then they'll call as many people as they know to try and see if your opinion is viable. It frustrates me. I've been working this barn for many, many, many years, and I got to keep my mouth shut because if I say what I'm thinking, sometimes I lose my job. And in some cases I have, and I've been okay with that. But so that's Dr. Redden on FaceTime. He's walking us through the whole process, and that's Abby Hill with the hat next to me. She's gone to a bunch of his clinics, and she thinks these things are the thing. And so she's all excited that we're going to do it. And I said, well, good, you come and help. So we did it. And there we are putting him on. And he's clearly uncomfortable already. And this happened. Now you see the bone is still a good, viable coffin bone. It hasn't demineralized or lost at all. But as soon as we put those things on that bone, it peak. And about less than a week, he punched. And we put him down. And I was sad, but I was mostly pissed because that didn't have to happen. That horse was doing fine. But that's one of my failures. This is another one, same barn, same opinion, same people. This is a kind of a mutt, Frisian cross, kind of big horse, very metabolic, overweight, really sweet man. I got her years ago because the farrier that used to do her did all handmaids, and she'd get impatient and he'd start smacking her in the belly with her ass. She's a big girl, she didn't need to be hit. But she got a little bit of white line disease on her hind foot. So we opened it up, treat it, it'd get better. Then it'd come back periodically, and she's metabolic, and so you can't always get ahead of it. And try to get her to soak it, clean tracks or something similar. No, she won't bear from it. You figure out how to do that, we can beat this. It didn't work. And then literally, in a really short amount of time, it went from a little spot to this. So the vet says, well, we're going to resect it. All right. So the vet and I meet there, she goes, would you do it? I go, you never done this? She said, no. So we resected it. And I did what I always do. I took away almost half that foot, so I put a heart bar on. And this horse was doing well. I typically don't put on backward shoes, but in this case there's no toe. And so I put the shoe where the foot still was, and I put the sole guard in there. and she did good. But same people in the barn. Well, she's still lame. Of course she's lame. It's going to take her a year to grow that foot back. Give her some time, and she'll be fine. She's doing good. She's moving good. And this is her. That's my photograph, Casey. Good guy. Oops. Good shooter. I can count on one hand the apprentices in 36 years that I'm really proud of, and that's one of them. Most of them, they make enough money to be dangerous and then they quit. They never learn another thing. But she's not 110%, but she's doing pretty darn good. That's soft ground. So they decided that the hard bar was too much pressure. They wanted a regular shoe. And this was all the people at the barn. This wasn't the owner who very impressionable. And they brought this vet to know him. So she calls him. She says, what do you think? I said, I think we're losing. I think that's a bad idea. Now, in most cases that I've worked on over the years, white line disease, you can take off half the foot on all four corners and they don't go lame. But this horse was overweight, metabolic, and had a lot of other things going on. And she had a big back end, and she's had, I said, if we take off that support, we're going to lose her. And they just kept bugging the vet. So I did it with the vet. I said, I'll do it under protest with you and the owner standing there. And I want to make it very clear that I'm doing this because I'm following the veterinary prescription, but I'm not in favor of it. And we did it. And a week later, she punched and died. And I just, and it irritated me to the point where I felt like I should have held my ground. But then we got somebody else to come and do it for them anyway. And I had history with both of these horses. Really, really like, the people were good enough, but the horses were just, they were my buddies, and I was gaining ground, and they just stopped listening. Did any of you see this picture online years ago? I got all kinds of grief for this because I posted it, but nobody read the article that went with it. I did not do this. And a backstory, when Stuart was alive, and anybody know Mark Payne? Mark and I were roommates. He used to own Sierra Horseshoe School, but it was myself and Mark, Stuart Greenberg. I can't remember. There's 5 farriers. I think 4 of us were journeymen. This woman buys a horse. It's got front shoes only. She gets home in the dark, turns it out, goes to bed. Horse runs up and down the fence the entire night. She comes out, I can't walk on, it's back in. So we come out, and she calls the vet. And I don't know if any of you remember the really early version of a Mustad glue-on shoe. They were an open-heel shoe. Couldn't shape them. They were 3/4 of an inch thick, and you had low knee tabs. He puts these things that didn't fit at all on these back feet. Well, you know what the coffin bow's trying to do? And it's got maybe 3 millimeters of sole if we're lucky. And we go out there, and this thing is just bug-eyed, and we can't pick a foot. Well, my New Zealand buddy was getting ready to move to Pennsylvania and marry a veterinarian, and she knew Dr. Pollitt's anesthesiologist. So she called him, asked Dr. Pollitt, what should we do? He said, no brainer. Give the horse an epidural. She won't feel a thing. Get some support on his feet, and she'll be fine. So you poured some Equithane or something in the bottom just while we were trying to figure out what else to do, but you couldn't, I mean, literally, it was that quick. She couldn't stand it. So we called the vet, told him what the plan was, and he's the one that drilled these holes in this foot and put this shoe on. He told this woman that would relieve the pressure, and the horse would heal from the inside out. To me, all it did was weaken the hoof wall. And Dr. Pollitt looked at that and he said, well, if you wanted to relieve pressure, he didn't go deep enough. All he did was damage the hoof wall. And so, this is a different horse I'm talking about. Did the same thing to this one. So, the vet agrees to meet us. And that son of a bitch shows up an hour ahead of us and kills that horse. And we cut the legs off and dissected him, and I took the solar plane, because his other founder didn't founder. You killed him. And I took the solar plane in, and we took another picture of Stuart Greenberg like this going in the vet. And I took it into the vet's office and I dropped it on the desk. And you cannot tell me that that horse found. Oh yeah, well, my the owner of the clinic, he did that, and he really believes in that, and I really killed this horse for nothing. So I got a phone call from this guy one time. He said, "You got to come out. My neighbor's horse is going to be euthanized tomorrow. Really nice quarter horse, has a history of mild laminitis, but vet came out and punched a bunch of holes in the foot." I got red-faced instantly. I went, "Whoa, okay, I'll go." So I go out and I see this, and I'm kicking dirt clods, and this poor woman is just, well, I did what I do. I put a hot bar on it, and that horse literally walked off instantly. And the vet was going to euthanize it the next day. And I filled these holes up as I went, and Dr. Paul at the NAEP thing, he was one of the guests, and Fran Yerga at Healthcare Lameness wrote an article about this horse, and they did a follow-up article. And Dr. Pollock was very interested in this because he believes there's a possibility that the hoof wall regenerates from the inside out as well as from the top down. He hasn't, he might have proven it by now, but at the time he wasn't sure. He wanted to know if I had a micrometer, I could measure the depth of the hole each time. But I'd already gone too far from that. I mean, this is several weeks in, and I cleaned it up. But the first thing I did was I filled all those holes with everything. And I did it not knowing that that would help at all, but in my head it added some rigidity to the wall. And this was literally 6 weeks after I put those hot bars on. And that horse was going to be dead. And, you know, she's a really nice mare, really nice woman. This woman was in tears because they were going to kill the horse. All she needed was feet to stand up. I don't do it anymore. I don't go up to that area. And when I work on these therapeutic cases, my goal usually, if I go into the vet, is to get the farrier that normally takes care of the horse. I don't need any more clients. Get them involved, and then turn them back. And 99 times out of 100, they don't want to have any part of it, so they leave and I'm stuck in it. Like this one got sound again, so they took it back. So this is the new Kahn core shoe, and this is Mike Wildenstein doing a suspensory modification. I don't know if you looked at that shoe or not, but it's got a really nice toe on that hind. I got some samples and I put them on a 3-day event horse. Then went right to Galway to go to work. Horse gets ridden every single day. It came back, and they're going to be in 10 millimeters, but this is only 8 millimeter. And I reset them. I probably could have reset them twice, but I didn't. I did a little bit. They got some steel to work with, and a toe that you barely have to touch with a hammer. This is the Kahn Omni with the hand-turned glue-on tabs on that Pat Rice did. There was no foot on one side, so we had nothing to nail to it. And I think Jason has some of the tabs we're going to experiment with. I mean, we got a horse coming in. It's kind of messed up. So this is where, you know, I've been doing this a long time, and I used to have a box full of magazines and newspaper articles from the 80s, and something new would come along, and then it disappeared. And then it would come back, relabeled, somebody else had reinvented it. And I always believed that if I couldn't get it around all the poke holes, and there was a gimmick otherwise, people ask me, how do you shoe a 4-H pony differently than you would a Grand Prix dressage horse? I don't know. I may use a different piece of stock, but I keep my job very simple, and my horses stay sound. But then I work with a lot of vets, and they don't like nails, a lot of them. And this vet will like Polyflex, and this vet will like EasyCare. And so I learned how to do that, and I make really good money at it, and it works. So when I was a lecturer at the Laminitis Symposium, they introduced a plywood shoe that they put on the drywall screws, and no, there's no way in hell I put my career trying to save feet and manage feet, and you're putting drywall screws. Not going to happen. Well, I worked with Dr. O'Grady quite a bit. He goes, Lock it up, Buttercup, you can do this, and it's gonna work. So, vet clinic in Petaluma, California, had this horse. This horse lived at the clinic, still does. At the time, had been there for 8 years. Had a full-time IV thing hanging from the ceiling. She was on so many drugs that her kidneys were failing. So they called, and the farrier that took care of her was a friend of mine. He literally tried everything and gave up. And so they called Dr. McGrady. And I said, what are you doing? He said, what you do is you call RT. He lives there. He'll do it. So then he calls me and goes, put on a wooden shoe and screw it in. Well, Steve, come on. He goes, just do it. So I did. When I went to meet this horse, they said, we're not going to do it. We're going to put her down. But we have a navicular horse here. Would you work on that one? I said, yeah. So I did. I said, well, can I meet her? Well, yeah, you can meet her. So I went and met her. And she was all bright and healthy. Couldn't stand at all. This is the first day I worked on her. She's in her late 20s. She's 30 or 31 now. I've been doing her 3 years. I'm not. Oh, that's my band. I thought that was my phone. That's my band. This is the next day. Well, my Grady's might be onto something. But you know, found a horse, especially when it's that old, doesn't grow on a foot. So I did the wooden shoes a couple times, and then I got a Stewart clog, and I plastic welded tabs on it. Mechanics were the same, but I didn't have to put screws in the foot. I really prefer to do this than that, but I glued them on. And that's how that ended up. This was almost 4 years ago, and she's still cruising. The woman that owns her, she's lovely. She owns the company that picks up the garbage. And she said, we're not the Sopranos, but we've had our fair share of death row. She's Italian. And she's got money, so she's paid for that horse. It's been 11 years now. That horse has lived at the clinic. And so when I first started doing her, she'd barely walk, and she'd take her out in the arena, and she'd hand walk. And then she got to where she let go of the rope, and she turned around to close the gate. Horse took off running, ran clear across property. And she does that regularly now, and she can barely walk after she does that, but she goes and plays. And then the vet calls me and said, well, Plain Jane got a little rowdy, she's a little sore, let's have a look. So she got, what happened with her initially was her pastern collapsed, and they put a whole bunch of screws in it. You know, what happens next, full weight bearing on the other foot, down she went. Then she found her in the foot with the screws in it, so we had kind of a double landing. And the foot with the screws in it grows really fun and really quick, so we actually are every single time just to try and get things as close to comfortable as we can. She has good days and bad days, but she's having a birthday coming up, and we're going to celebrate with her. Freedom shoes, that aluminum thing, and I read about those, was not interested at all, but when my vets called me, she's another case where the farrier just gave up. And a good farrier, competent, tried everything he knew, and walked away. And this horse, a dressage horse, and the vet said this woman hadn't been able to ride this horse in a year. And she said, have you ever used the freedom shoe? And I went, oh, no. She goes, would you? Okay. So I get them, really mechanically, they're kind of cool. They're kind of like a clog. It's kind of an omnidirectional thing. Those little tungsten pins, they last a long time. I put impression material in there. I nailed one, and that sucker took off. She started riding it the next day, put it back into training, got the farrier that used to do the horse back, showed him what I did. Now, obviously, they either fit or they don't. If they don't fit, you got to do something else. In this particular case, you didn't have to do anything weird to the foot. They just fit. And this was 4 or 5 years ago, and that horse is still in those shoes, still doing good. And the other thing, it's made by the soft ride boot people, designed by veterinarian. Well, again, one of my vets said, you try those? I went, no. Will you? Okay. So you can drill them down, or you can glue them. I tend to do both. So I had a couple horses in them, and they were doing good, so then we got one and more and more and more. I probably had 5 or 6 horses in them, and at the toe they started to peel up. And one of my horses that wasn't stall bound, that brown piece just popped off. So I redid it, a couple of weeks go by, it pops off again. So I take pictures, and I didn't ask her for nothing. I just took pictures and I wrote to them. I said, you might want to check your gluing process because these pop up. So I get a form letter back that says, we need to be a qualified farrier or veterinarian to apply these. Okay. I said, I'm a journeyman. I teach classes for the AEP, teach a class at college, been doing this 36 years, don't know it all, but I've got some experience. What more do I need to know how to do this? About 2 weeks later, I get a box of shoes in the mail. So Dr. O'Grady's friends looked at me, so I was whining to him about it. He goes, well, I'm going to call him. And I said, I don't need anything. I don't want anything. I don't like using them anyway. But they might want to adjust their gluing process because they have ads or videos of performance horses wearing these shoes. And my horses that were stuck in small areas kept them on. And any horse that I had that had a room to move, they'd come apart. So if you use those, again, good luck with them, but I don't want them. This is another good one. This baby, this is an interesting story. The mare, she was feral. She was 5 or 6 years old, never even had a halter on. Stallion jumped over the fence, and this was the result. This baby had a little hole in his esophagus, so when it bent down, milk would come out of his nose. But it was fairly minor, but it kind of had mild pneumonia most of its life. And I had a foal like that years ago, and we ended up putting it down because his neck would swell up with milk, and it would gush out of his nose. And that's esophagus surgery on a human is difficult at best, but nearly impossible on a horse. But he was born with his fetlocks on the ground, and I've done a bunch of these on these crooked-legged babies, and usually 2 or 3 times, and they get a little older, a little stronger. This took a while. We finally got him up on his feet. He's probably 3 now. He moved to Montana. They're riding. He's doing fine. And the mare, it was a weird story. This little girl saw it, 10-year-old girl, and Dad has tons of money and wanted to save this horse. So the trainer is a good friend of mine. She's in Montana now too, but she worked with her and got her to where you could lead her, and she didn't paw your head off. And their farrier came out and trimmed her and started nailing and this horse went nuts. So they gave her a full tube of door, went back to her horse still pays another tube of door. And then he had a tantrum. I know the guy, and I've seen him do it. He threw his toolbox. He's kicking, he's cussing. He goes, you drug that son of a bitch again, and I'm leaving. And they said, bye. So I went out with my helper, and she's tiny. And I don't know how she does it, but she can get out of those waspy ones very quiet and very gentle and very well. And we got her to where we could trim her. And we nailed shoes on her a couple times, but it was tough. So then I thought, I always think about EasyCare. You can really stand up. So you can trim her foot, set her in an EasyCare shoe, glue it on, wrap it up, off she went. So we did that 5 or 6 times, and she moved to Montana. And I got on the Find a Farrier thing and found her a journeyman. And his trainer is a legitimate trainer that actually works with them, works their feet, pick it up, tap on it, try to make the job for the farrier. Now she's wearing full shoes and she's riding. So that was one of the wins. This horse lived in the stall for a year. Couldn't even hand walk it. The vet considers herself a farrier as well. She said, horse has 7 abscesses in 1 foot. What? So I go, and literally she drilled the crap out of his foot. There are holes everywhere. I said, I'm pretty sure it's just one big one, and that house horse no soul left at all. I wasn't allowed to work on it. And the lady that owned the barn didn't like this vet. I was the only horse in the barn she worked on. The lady that owned the horse, she was a European woman, and she was always gone. She was absentee. And well, then the vet got COVID, and the horse needed some attention. So the owner of the barn said, how's sick are you? She goes, yeah. She goes, well, this horse needs some help. Can our tea have it? Yes, please, Tom. Yeah. This was a no-brainer. I mean, this horse maybe was laminated at one time in his life. Now it was suffering from 7 holes in his foot. And that's the way she moved. Her name is Barbie, or Barbarella, they called her. But her hoof wall was so damaged that we just took off all the loose stuff. Then I put on a pony shoe because the owner bought them from somewhere and mailed them. So this is what I want on her. And I had no problem with it because I could grind and make them do what I want. But I put them on a casting tape because there was no wall. And she walked away. And my helper took her out in the arena and she trotted. And the owner of the barn literally started crying. She said, I haven't seen that horse trot in over a year. And that's my helper, Savannah. And I can't see him, but there's like 4 horseshoes over here watching the drum to see how we did. Oh, there they are. They're warming. And this is another little crooked-legged fall. And I think we did the medial support. You know, a lot of veterinarians do a scrape the periosteum in the knee, and as it heals, it shakes up and twists the leg around. That's pretty invasive, so we try this first. It's a medial support shoe, so if you do a plumb line from the knee down, you miss the foot altogether. But we put that little medial support to line that up. And literally, you gotta be careful because you can overdo these. We did it 7 days on, 7 days off, 7 days on, 7 days off. And we did it 3 times. And as her body developed and she grew and she had a little bit of support to keep her from getting more crooked, and we took them off and she was fine. She did totally fine. I love doing that stuff, especially when those babies are super quiet. You crawl around on your hands and knees. And I learned that from an old farrier years ago that did a lot of quarter horse babies. And you get a pen full of them and they're bug eyed and with him. He got on his hands and knees. You move around real slow and you bend a leg and you turn the foot, and you find another leg and turn the foot. And I'm not quite brave enough or spry enough to do that anymore, but I have done it in the past. This one I'm really happy with. This is Moon Tunes, and you could put 4 neighborhood kids on that sway back and you go. He's 37. He's having a birthday in a couple of weeks. We're going to have a carrot cake party. When I met him, this one of my vets I work with, she sends me out there, and he's stuck to the ground. He's not American, he can't move. And the lady opens the door, and she cleans the stall, and he doesn't move. And she says, we can try something. We'll plot and do something. So, you know, obviously, I tried hardware first, and it helped a little bit, not much. So we put a clot on him, and she's cleaning her stall. He trots off. And so we're on to something. We keep him in the clogs for maybe 6 months. And then I get him in they have a new shoe called the triple density that's like the bottom of a Nike tennis shoe. They're all black for these things. It's trying to, and so we put those on. And literally every other day, she goes on a 2-mile hike with this horse. And he's 37 years old. And he nickers when he sees you coming. She's there, she spends time. She took my class. Where I teach is probably 2 hours from where this horse is. And she has a sister up close to where I'm at. And her sister also has horses. So they were lovely. She would come up, grab her sister, take my class, and then spend the night in San Rosa, and then drive home. But it was really good for her because we did all the laminitis and fiber stuff. And then she got to dissect the front. So now you know what's going on inside the intuitive problem. And, you know, honestly, I think the success here was more the horse than me. He just didn't know about it. You know, we changed his mechanics enough to where he was comfortable, and he went through it. And these are just some of the things that vets make me do. and I do it, but I have a good relationship with the vets. If it doesn't work, I do something different. And I've had really good luck with it. But I love working on the cripples. It's very rewarding when it works, and it's just heartbreaking when it doesn't. But and these are some of the messes I've been in. Now the one on the top right, that black foot, I walked off the job, and I only time I ever walked away on a horse that was suffering like that. And this woman had 15 horses, 11 of them were horribly foundered. And I'm there with the vet, and I looked at him and I said, "How can you do this?" Both that mare's front feet were like that. She wanted to breathe. I said, "This is cruel. This is cruel." And he goes, "Yeah, my boss won't let me quit." And I go, "I don't have a boss." And she would stand there and feed sugar cookies while we were working with her. And the farrier Kahn and me said, "You need to change your food program and euthanize some of these horses." Well, her brother, I think, was a congressman or a senator, so she threatened a lawsuit right away. "You watch your tongue." I don't know, deal with you or that nonsense, all that. But the picture right below it is a friend of mine took over, and that's what she got. A different horse, obviously. The one that should have been euthanized long ago finally got put down. But this woman still has a whole yard full of young, mostly Arabs that are punching through the bottom of their foot. I don't have a stomach for them. I mean, I try. I really do. I try and do it for the horses, even if I don't like the people. That's why I got in this business. Don't like people, I don't mess with the horses, and I give them a deal. You guys are an exception. I like you guys. So like I said before, $177 billion was the 2.2 million jobs in the horse industry. And so, somebody said, well, I'm going to leave my horse barefoot. It's going to be lame for a year and a half. But, look at they either can do their job or they can. But I'm all for the barefoot horses. I really am. Mine are barefoot because I'm too lazy to shoe. My wife calls me the shoer half the time. But during the semester when I teach, students do it, so I don't have to. She said, I thought when I married you, I would get better service. And I said, when we were dating, you were first on the list. But not anymore. That's not an unusual story, I'm sure. This is one of my classes, and I absolutely love this. This is so rewarding. And the woman, I have to point it to you, my favorite student ever, this one right here. That's Jordan. She's the one that's going to work for the Gregories. She was my star, man. She's soaked it in like a sponge. Front row, 4 years, never missed a class. And I had a young man, he was on the spectrum, and it was when Stuart, he taught one class and then he got really sick. And so I wasn't officially hired, but I did the Latin Manners lecture for him for 15 plus years. And I knew the advisor for the class. But since I wasn't officially hired to run keys, she'd have to come to class. And I did the entire semester except for that one class. And there was a young man in there that was autistic. And she said, we screwed up. By law, we are required the classroom assistant for that young man. And I said, don't worry, I got this. So I called my daughter. That's what she does for a living. She graduated from Kahn Northridge in speech pathology and language disorder. And she works with autistic students and young adults. And her motto was assume competence. She had a nonverbal student in Los Angeles. He got kicked out of every program for violent outbursts and awkward behavior and couldn't speak a word. She taught her how to type. She wrote a book, got published by Harvard, became a bestseller. PBS did a documentary that's coming out in a month, I think. Going to the preview of it, but my daughter lives in Santa Rosa now, but the film crew came up and filmed my daughter, and I'm really kind of proud of the kid. But anyway, I said, what do I do? He was verbal, he was a farm kid, nice kid, but he couldn't make eye contact very long. And she said, just treat him like anybody else. I said, dude, I know you're scared, I know you're doing. I'm here to help. So I did. I said, dude, I know you're scared, I know you're doing. Anytime you want to come and talk after class, I'm right there. I didn't stare at him. It's like wives hide the wolves. You don't want to stir them down. And so he'd come, he'd walk back and forth across my desk, and he'd lay his notes down and say, I didn't really understand it. I go, have a seat. And he did that. And then it got to be where he comes and goes, hey, what do you mean we talked? And we got this really cool relationship. So finals come, and you're required by law to get time and a half. It was a 3-hour final. And I had this girl come up, hand me her paper with nothing on her name. I said, what are you doing? I don't have time for this. I've never given anybody F in my life, but if you don't take the test, I have to. I don't have any notes. I got some. I don't have a book. Well, you don't have a book for this class, but here's a Gregory book and a Butler book. It's an open book test. Just try. No, I don't have time for this. I walked out. I walked back to the back of the room with the advisor and said, what did you do with her? She said, give her an F. That's what I did. And so this young man took the test all by himself. Missed a B by like 2 points. Took him 3 hours and 15 minutes. My advisors were like this, and they said, no. As long as he reads. He went to shearing school, and he did well with the horses. He had a hard time with people. And he called me. He sent me an email. And his name was Kenneth. And I'm really proud of him, because he was, like I said, he was a farm kid. He was a hard worker. He was in there. He couldn't communicate very well. And but he had a hard time with clients, and he couldn't get an apprenticeship. He worked with one guy for a while. The guy kept calling me saying, how do I do this, whatever. And he said, told him to make a toe band. I turned around and made 10 of them. I would be specific. Make one toe band and bring it to me, and he'll do it. Tell him to make 10 of them, and he'll do that. Well, then his dad got in, and somehow, the Farrier friend of mine, he felt like there was a lawsuit coming, so he walked away. But I would brag about him in my class. I said, this is important to me. I want it to be important to you. So try your best, do hard. There's no such thing as a bad question. It's just let's learn together. And I tell him a story about Kenneth and how hard he worked. I said, I haven't heard from him in years. Literally within a week, I get an email from this kid. He goes, remember me? And I go, are you kidding? Of course I do. He's struggling. And I sent him to a trail ride place that they wanted a warm body that could nail on shoes. And I haven't heard from him, so I don't know how it worked out. And this is dissection lab. The big guy there, he took the class because his wife was into horses. He was more into fly fishing. So he and I would sit in the corner and talk about different bugs to tie and different places to fish. And he was fascinated by forage work. I cut 2 pieces of concave. I made one shoe, handed him the steel and tongs and safety glasses, and I went and helped my other students. When I came back, he made that shoe. He had never forged a piece of steel in his entire life. And I swear to you, he could have nailed that on the front. And he was happy. And he gave me a whole box of flies that he tied. But these are my students. They're jumping in with both feet. This is the podiatry class. This happened to be the one in Georgia. I did it with Dr. Parks and Steve O'Grady. And Dr. Parks had just got a pizza oven. Just got to come to my house for beer and pizza. I can cook a pizza in 90 seconds. So we all made her go. And sure enough, 45 seconds in, pull it out, turn it around, 45 more seconds to have beer and pizza at his house. This was a good class. You see there's quite a few students there. In the old days, I used to get that kind of crowds all the time. Now if I get 15, that's great. And these are some of the students. They really get a sense of accomplishment. And if I get 1 or 2 guys, that's a lot. It's 90% women. When I first started, it was a little bit more. But I found if it was too hot or too stinky or too difficult, guys would disappear after lunch. But the girls, they're game, they're tough, they wanted to learn. I'm involved in this group called Equitarian Initiative, and if you ever get an opportunity to work with them and talk to them, I highly recommend it. They go to third world countries or impoverished Indian reservations, which is where I live, and they help them with their equals. The first time I went was the Pine Ridge and the Rosebud Indian Reservation, which highest percentage of alcoholism and drug addiction in the United States. And the natives that I met were so lovely. Most of them had programs for kids where they would get young men and women that had managed to get by the drugs and alcohol. They'd go into the grade schools and they'd bring these kids out to the farms and teach them the horse culture and the language and show them that you don't have to be like mom and dad passed on. You can do this instead. And it was just beautiful. And horses, in their culture, are spiritually related. So they could live in a 1-bedroom travel trailer that's fallen in a hole and have 25 horses that are in perfect condition. These horses are feral. They're owned, but they're turned out in the Badlands. The young stallions, they'll bring them in at 2 or 3, and then the vets will come. And I trimmed a few feet, and I spent most of my time holding back legs so the vets didn't get killed. But while they were sedated, we trimmed their feet, and then they'd go back into training once they were gelded. The mares would just go back out. But I saw some of those incredibly beautiful horses I've ever been around. Met this young native. He had a really pretty little 2-year-old. He was out riding this chestnut mare. He came across one of the wild herds and they took off. There was a brand new baby laying in the grass. He said, I got out of there because I thought they'd come back, and they never did. He said, I went back and picked her up and put her on the saddle with me. I had another mare with a foal. He rides back. He said, I took her and he said, will you please help me? And this mare had one baby on each side, and that's the life for me. I'm shaking talking to this kid. He's probably 19 or 20. He had 7 or 8 horses that nobody could get near unless he said it was okay. He'd go in the arena, he'd call him over, and he'd call the vet in, and he'd call me in, and it was incredible. It was so rewarding. And one of the guys, his name was Percy Whiteplum. You ever see Dancing with Wolves? In that scene where Kevin Costner said, hey, that's my hat. And in the corner, the guy says, you left it in the woods. I in the field, I found it. It's mine now. Well, that's Percy. And he took us to the killing fields of Wounded Knee. I read the book in high school. It didn't mean anything to me. After listening to his story, I read the book again. And he said, I'm not here to make you sad or make you angry. I'm here to show you how 2 cultures could be along. But this is the group. They go to Peru and Costa Rica. They used to go to Haiti. I've not been overseas with them, but I added this because this horse has never been touched by a hind. That blue stuff, they put him in that squeeze chute to drug him, and he kicked the crap out of it, and it was blue. But look at the frog and the conchers, and I mean that. I don't know how you could improve on that. That horse has never been touched by a human being. This is a 3-year-old stallion. But this is that's what we dealt with. They get him in there and give him a little bit of drugs to calm him down, then they give him a little more, and then they give him ketamine before we work on him. And this is one of the babies we worked on. Her foot was like this, and she couldn't keep up with the herd. And after I worked with one of the vets, and he and I trimmed her together, and we got that. And when the native that helped us on this job came 3 or 4 days later, and he said for the first time in her life, she ran with the herd and not behind it. And she lost an eye. That's how we ended up with her. They gathered her up and we took her eye out and stitched it shut, and we worked on that foot. It's the little things. This was at the Rosebud Reservation where they have a kid program, and these young men, I was teaching them how to trim. And when we went there for the educational thing, we had 29 people the first day at the Pine Ridge, and many of them rode their horses from way out in the sticks just to learn how to take better care of their feet. And I got, there were 4 or 5 of us farriers there. We all donated to us, and we gathered up as many donations as we could. And so we left anybody that was really learning. We left them with a set of nippers and a rasp. And there's one young man there that he went to shoeing school, and so he was very helpful. I mean, I never saw one single horse in shoes on him, around barefoot, but he was real helpful with the trimming, and he was very gentle, very good horseman. He had no way to take care of his tools. So I sent him a buffer and some buffer wheels and some rouge so he could sharpen his knives and stuff. And then I went back a few months later and did this thing. And he was all grands. He had tools at work, but they just have nothing, and they make do with what they have. That's it. We talked about feet. That's granddaughter feet. And that's a Hancock horse that would rather buck you off and look at. She's broken my wife's leg twice and bucked me off in that pond. I'm out there going like this, and in the trail box, we're working cows. He comes over and goes, "Well, RT, at least you still got your bonnet." Have to call her. Anyway, that's it. We're going to do a horse later. Didn't mean to keep you so long because there's donuts and coffee, and I think a taco truck's coming. But any questions at all? No? Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
So a little bit of history on the horse. Tell us a little bit about it.
Anybody know anything about this guy?
It's a horse. Sorrel stud has got 3 cracks. Yeah.
Those cracks have gone through the coronary band, so when or if they heal, eventually he's going to have a scar there, and that's something that needs to be maintained. But to keep him balanced and get that tissue to heal, that scar would just make a line and it shouldn't pop open again.
Yeah.
And the other stacked up on this side. And I think by the time Jason gets done, he's going to drop those heels and get a little bigger shoe because he's kind of missing his leg here. Yeah, 2 on that side? Yeah, 2 on that side. 1 on this one.
I don't have a lot of history on this guy. This is the first time I see him.
Yeah.
They just told me he has quarter cracks and
Where do they do it in, you know?
these are rope horses. Yeah.
I was guessing.
Header dealer?
It's a heel horse.
Yeah, no, he sits
Yeah.
down and got a saddle sores.
Yeah. So,
Pretty willing, these guys are double tough usually. There's not a lot on the bottom of the foot, so I think what we're gonna end up doing here is, just trying to flip that corner, get a shoe on that fits. Jason might do a glue trick here in a minute.
It's high immediately.
Yeah, you can see his hairline's pushed up right there too.
Yeah.
See right above that crack, that hairline's pushed up, so this has been going on for a while with him.
Yeah. So we'll just, really the only spot on this foot I'm gonna trim is just from this quarter back through the heel a bit. So there's not much to work with on the bottom.
You know that slide of Mike Savaldi's where he talked about when the bones tip forward, how you lose that concavity or that arch? Is a perfect example. Jason has nowhere to go with that foot. So when you think of that next you can't tell, but eventually that bone's sitting like that and probably starting to peel up a little bit, which puts some strain on the back half of that foot and those quarter fractures pop.
Yeah. That's,
Nothing there.
no.
He's a stallion. What did you find when you crawl around on the ground? My goodness.
He's a good stallion, man.
Huh?
He's a good
He
stallion.
sure is. How about that? Hope they don't breed him for his feet. That was very nice, I'm sorry.
How long have they had him? The last 3 years. 3 years.
He's a good looking boy. It's a crack on this side of the breed, you know, if you notice that, but that soon there, the hairline's all punched up. He's getting some pressure from the ground, pushing up on that area.
No. Hoping
Same thing with this foot, he has no arch at all with the toe. It's just flat.
What are you saying there, Jason? High and short?
Yeah, both of them are high medial.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, his hairline's pushed way up, he's high medially.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of extra peel there.
Yeah.
You feel this? He's about to pop a crack on the medial side. If you guys want to check this out, this is how you can kind of see this happen before it does. Just rub your fingers around there, you feel that little bulge. And if you look corresponding to that, his hairline is pushed up. And so, go ahead and check that will pop too. You end up with 4 cracks instead of 3. See if we can check it out. You feel right there? Starting to get a little line right there.
I burned something. I've got a pin on my toe. I'm good. I'm gonna stop very often.
You feel that? Yeah. It kind of corresponds with that. Push that down. Yeah, huh? Yeah, there we go. go. Did you feel that? On the other side?
Yeah, you can already see it.
Yeah, it's starting to come in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, check this out, guys. You can already see it starting to crack. Hasn't opened up yet, but the crack is definitely there. Okay. Now, if this gets dealt with before it goes up into here, you got a good chance of not seeing that again.
And this one's not up into the coronary band yet.
Come on in. You can see that. Oh, yeah. You know, quarter horses, I think, tend to be more prone to this, same as you think, Jason, but big body, small feet, hit the ground really hard. You have to be extra careful how you shoe them and keep them in balance because they're so big in musculature. There's not a lot of foot under there.
And a lot of these, when you've got an imbalance, anytime you have an imbalance in a foot, you're going to have distortion. So when you have a new horse come to your book, or it's like we were talking about, you have a horse you're 2 or 3 cycles in, you're still seeing flares, dishing, you don't have the feet figured out yet. So in my practice, when I'm shoeing and I have a horse on my book for a long time, we're hardly ever taking the foot to the post, except to clench. So on this horse, a lot of times what you see, when you're high medially, everything, the force vector coming down the leg, and then the ground reaction with the foot, when you're high medially in the medial heel, it wants to push the foot out to the lateral toe. So you're always going to fight this. Then you combine that with the cracks. More than likely it's a combination of things. Taking the foot basically to rock bottom and then having an imbalance. Right now this whole foot is working against itself, both front feet. So this is definitely something that, you know, continue to be shoeing this way, it's going to continue to happen and get worse. So, and horses in my book, like this particular one, RT and I haven't talked about this yet. We've kind of thrown some ideas around just looking at it. Now that I'm under it and actually flooring the feet, with cracks on both fronts, medial and lateral corners, I'd be inclined to use heart bars on this one.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's more than likely what we'll do.
I'm just going to ask you if you had any.
Yeah, yeah. So, and we'll use Kahn shoes on the front end, probably a kegger, and then I'll do what I do in my day-to-day, and we'll weld in inserts to make the heart bars. That's what I found is the most effective thing. Pre-made heart bars, I just feel like you're struggling and you're always compromising to get the fit you want, where if you take a regular shoe, shape it, weld an insert in, you can get the fit you want, you can get the shoe you want, and then weld it in and you're good to go. So.
With the pre-made heart bar shoe, it's difficult to get that frog plate where you need it.
Correct.
A lot of times they're too long and you got to bend them out, and it's just, and I'm not good enough of a force to make one from scratch and have it fit, and it would take me all day to do it, but the inserts are super handy.
So I obviously didn't second foot, but how are you assessing that you are in fact high medium?
Looking at,
Landmarks you know.
yeah, so landmarks, I'm couple of things I look for. I don't necessarily sight feet for balance. I definitely don't sight hind feet. My opinion is you cannot sight hind feet because of the reciprocal apparatus. It's never right. So what I'm looking for is more along the AFA guidelines, that I want the horse standing in the center of the foot as best we can accomplish that. Some horses are just really crooked and you're not going to get there. I don't believe horses land flat. I don't believe they're intended to land flat, so I'm not looking for that. Most cases, if you try to make a horse land flat, you're either going to end up with stuff like this, or you're going to end up with joint spacing crushed. You're going to end up with a lame horse. So on this one, on front feet, when I pick it up and let it relax, you can see that the medial heel is longer. You can also see in the hairline that the medial hairlines are pushed up, so that tells me that that's high.
So is he orienting his foot to a different location to accommodate that being high medial?
How do you mean?
Well, like you said, kind of you're trying to get in the center of his limb.
Right.
So when you walk up, like what about just kind of looking at it from the top?
Right.
So you think it's not in the center of his limb? Is he putting it kind of outside of himself?
Right,
inside
right.
Of himself?
Sometimes they will. On this case, I'm relying more on the hairlines being pushed, and then where the foot hangs. This horse is not terribly crooked. Thank you. So when we come up, we're pretty straight all the way through. The major thing we have is this is all being pushed up, so the lateral's being pushed out. So, you'll have some, he's a little bit offset. Bony column to the hoof capsule, we're more medially built.
Did you guys watch him walk at all? That left knee turns out just a little bit and he lands like that. He didn't land flat, and like he said, they don't. But he hits hard on the outside and then rolls over.
Yeah.
And I had one that was way towed out, and he did that. And that's hard to deal with. I tried the spiral shoe thing, and that was a miserable failure. I just let the horse be crooked and land like he wanted to land, and he'd do all right.
What is a spiral shoe?
Sidebone shoe.
Kind of sounds like it sounds. They build up one side and it goes narrow to the other side. Jim Ferry in Scotland, I think, is the one that he spoke on that many times. And I had him on the phone and on the email a couple of times and sending pictures and videos. And it was a foreign concept to me. But
So the side bone just kind of helps reduce that secondary slap effect.
yeah, it supposedly makes it land a little flatter. I was working with a vet at Rood and Riddle, and he said, "Why are you worried about that?" Because the horse stands like this and he walks like this, but he just hammers one side of his foot. And and this was many, many years ago. I think somebody did a study on this. They wanted a sideways wedge guide, and then it got really exaggerated. And somebody did one. They got all the way up to an inch just to experiment and see, because this horse was landing like this, so they kept jacking up one side, and it just got more animated and more wedgy. It just got more stuff in the way.
We did that with Mark Caldwell one time.
Oh, did you?
We we kept putting a super fast through the shoe to keep going on the medial branch, just keep exaggerating it, and it would never.
Yeah, I've got later, if you guys want to see it, I've got a couple of videos of the spiral shoe thing that I tried.
But it was not. We were not able. I mean, it was a lot,
Yeah.
and we could not make the horse land flat at all. It was not possible.
So a lot of these horses are built by committee. They're not really accurate. Very few times are you going to see a perfectly matched pair of feet. That's where we come in. If we're going to use them, we've got to try and stay out of their way. I think it's really easy, especially on a case like this, to overdo it, get real crazy with a Dremel tool, and then you end up having, like that one I showed you with this, quote, 7 abscesses. That horse had 7 holes drilled in his foot. I can't wrap my head around that, but that was way overdone. And the horse paid the price for it. She stood in the stall for a year. What'd you find, Jason?
outlet pressure.
You can see it from here. Right by the hairline, there's a bump. You guys probably want to take a look at that. See this? From here you can see it. And the football dives in and then comes out, creates that bump. That's just all pressure from the weight of the horse coming down and the weight of the ground coming up.
I wouldn't say I worry about it much. I definitely take it into account. It's something I think you have to always look at COR and COA. So it's, again,
You're not going to compromise the foot for the sake of putting the shoe in center rotation.
correct.
Yep.
But I think what you have to realize is there's a lot of terms, there's a lot of stuff that's supposedly new that is out there. That it's stuff we've kind of always had, and it just got popular because somebody put a name on something. But I think if you're doing solid work every day, solid trims, you're going to be there. So it's important, but it becomes almost secondary to the overall foot that you need.
Exactly, and he went size bigger, I would guarantee you. Got the wheels back there, they're supposed to be back there, so they got the quarter horse go out there. This back
Are clips ever a consideration when you're using like a hard bar or any bar shoe? You feel like it adds more traction to put on a bar shoe?
I'll use clips on performance horses, mainly so I can use less nails.
Right.
Pads, wedge pads, typically going to get clips, just because you have increased chance of it shearing. But overall,
rescue you, when you rescue things, you don't need your checkbook. Because my checkbook in that case.
typically when you're building or shaping shoes for a horse, they're going to be mirror images. So I didn't try to make these shoes where they're mirror images. I just made shoes to the feet, and they're spot on.
Rights and lefts.
Every horse has rights and lefts, fronts and hinds. If you're building one shape and putting it on every foot, you're cheating something somewhere. So just something to remember.
My other one's a cat too, though. No, he's on 14. Yeah, like a horse. He just does what he wants. You can't even tell him, you know? Can't name it.
Okay.
Don't get in the way of the camera, man.
He's nice to everyone.
Is my hair tighter than I wanted to be?
Do you have any tests for like making sure that horse can take the frog pressure of a hard bar?
So, depending on the case, yes and no. I don't typically worry about that too much because I'm not typically going to put positive frog pressure in the plate. It's going to be neutral for the most part. A lot of times I'll use impression material under the frog plate, so I have some give. Sometimes even a pad, depending on the foot. But I'm typically not putting positive. So what I want is when the horse bears weight, I want him to come down into the plate and just be support. So I don't want to push up.
Right.
So
You might grind on it a little bit if it's a prolapse frog. For that reason.
possibly, or I'll adjust where I weld the plate in.
Those
Yeah.
workman inserts are thinner than that shoe.
Yeah.
So you can put it towards the ground side of the shoe.
You want to do a nice turn, Goodrich? It's just a trim. You can't put her, she doesn't have the money for it. She doesn't have the money for it. I'm not driving the weight range from my horse. I know.
No power?
Their power cords don't lock in, so they vibrate loose. Hopefully.
I was gonna say, do you want somebody to weld, or are you gonna do it?
So, talking about the frog pressure, like Seth had mentioned, with the welded inserts, they're thinner than the shoe, so depending on what I want on the foot, I can either place it towards the foot surface or towards the ground surface. So I can adjust where I want that, and if I'm going to put any impression material under it. So. Yep.
So this one was tunnel behind, right?
Yeah.
What kind of morphology do you do that strip metal from that way? What's happening to the foot?
I'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
It's got sliders on
What
it.
it was to think.
Still unfloated or? Not even room in the foot to float it. We really didn't want to do pads. Impression material.
I think the only thing you got going for you now is you balance it. It's not going to push out quite so hard. But I think compression material, you get a lot of weight off that corner.
That's what I'm thinking.
Nice welding. You've done that before, haven't you?
I'm not going to pad them. Impression material underneath, yeah.
If you
Yeah.
had some foot to work with, you'd probably pad it and then cut the pad away.
Yeah, from the back.
Yeah, he really doesn't have any foot.
Yeah, sometimes on a horse like this, I'll even grind out thickness of the shoe on the foot surface.
Yeah, just to give him a little bit extra so he doesn't,
And that
doesn't
impression
drop down.
material
Yeah.
will distribute the weight,
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
so he's not going to hammer those.
When-
And you're gonna use like a medium?
Yeah, 35.
Yeah, 35. Yeah, and on ones like this, it would drop a lot floated. So on a case like this, just grinding into the shoe within a week, it's going to be down on it. Yeah.
That's
You've relieved it enough in that time to kill
Right,
some of that.
but if we had foot and we were working with a pad, you know, the thickness of like a heavy pad.
And so how would you do that? Would you just come in and just nip out a little piece of that?
I would, when I made the pad, yeah, I would just, on the bandsaw, just cut that section out. Yeah, yeah. And I would still use a hard bar.
So then would you rivet your pad to the hard bar then?
I always rivet my pads, yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's a nice horse, he's a working horse. In my opinion, the best thing in the world you can do for him is pull the shoes and kick him out.
Let him, yep.
Yeah, and if the coyotes don't eat him, he's gonna come back with feet, but his feet are gonna tell you then what he needs. And right now, we're kind of behind the eight ball with him. You know, we can only do so much, but this, I think, will help him, you know, get that balance a little bit better, and that aggression material is gonna distribute the weight more, so he's not gonna be
And
handling
it should stay in there for a couple, 2-3 weeks, okay?
Oh, yeah, I'll stay there for the yeah, he put the hole in the front pad so it'll attach.
Pick up the back and tell us what you see on the back.
To me, it looks a little high on the medium side. You know, on off-feed, I mean, you can make them look any way you want in your front. So I always try and just let them hang where they want to be. And if you look at it from the front, you can kind of see the hairlines a little bump, more so on this foot than this one, I think. Like those tiny little quarter horse feet, though, they're I think somebody got a hold of this foot already because that looks better. Yeah, that looks a lot better than it did. Oh, I know. I had a client one time, she said, always say please and thank you. Please give me your foot and thank you for giving me. I forget that sometimes.
Impression material.
What's the story of one-handed happened? And the video
Never left me. You're a woman. Dixie kept getting a sample off his horse.
Every time you show up at the bar, you had a smile,
She said,
Yeah, good time to demo those new hoof jack cradles.
Go get one.
wires from
If you're serious about
the United States.
Right there. Grab it.
Yeah,
right? And we're hiring right now, so.
You see it, Anthony? Yeah, right there.
How many versions do you think there's like or something else?
So it's kind of interesting, if you look way back in the bloodline,
My show, when I was living
Take those skills, start making them somewhere else. This is it's probably the easiest. You better not. That'd be so funny. Yeah, this is Facebook.
Instead of just newfound things.
Hit them up. Just tell them about yourself. Like, have you come out for a while? See if it'll work at all. You don't have to like. Yeah. We just hire people with character. That's what we're
Impression material is always going to put the material in, they have the horse stand on it. Oh, yeah. If you don't do that, especially under a pad, you're very likely to get pressure. It's too much.
The same with this one. I mean, that was almost like that. And this one's bleeding. And that other one right there, you can feel. No, I get it. Jason got the bulbs out of that thing and balanced it from the bottom, so that should be okay.
So this next week is going to be 7. So it's an 8-week
It's
program.
hard to use because you don't know where you're going to go and you don't know what's going to happen.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
You hurt yourself, pat yourself on the back, and then you come back in a year and you're a mess.
What's that?
Exactly.
What's that? Oh, that when I use dental impression material.
Like as bad as it is when you pick it up, you have no idea what phase you put it in.
Are you doing any sports medicine?
Especially under a pad, there's in most cases, if you just put it in, nail it up, put it down, it's already set up enough. It's just,
One day you might be surprised. Those are, I mean, oh yeah. Tough to get around. They're individuals just like that. Definitely have to sit in. You gotta have to.
The shoe and the rim are down there, and this could be trapped.
Fortunately, do stand well.
What are you putting in there?
This particular product is called Pity Putty from Sammy Pittman. It's a hoof clay, eucalyptus, honey, and under the dental impression, it helps to keep out any bacteria, keep the foot healthy under the dental impression, especially in the wetter climates. But I use it every horse that I put impression material on.
I've yet to use this. I like them. I like using them. She's got a horse that goes see and property
I think the biggest thing, even especially on a horse like this, but even in your everyday shoeing, is you just want to make sure everything you're doing is intentional. There's a reason for it. You've got the foot balanced, you got the shoe fit. Once the shoes fit, driving nails is pretty easy. They're going to go where they need to go. And then overall foot, just looking for anything you can improve. Today I'm looking at where this horse is going to be in 4 or 5 weeks. Even though I'm not going to do it, somebody here probably is going to. So I want them to have the best chance to move forward with this and then keep that going. So it's everything is thought out, everything is a plan. You have to have a plan and then execute that. Otherwise, you're nowhere. So I don't know if you want to patch anything or what do you want to do?
If he was in my barn, I wouldn't patch it.
Yeah, I wouldn't patch this at home.
What factors are you looking at to decide whether to patch or not?
I haven't patched one in 25 years. I see, at least the ones I've seen, a lot of times those cracks want to do this instead of this. Now in his case, they're doing this and popping, so it's a balancing. And I think if you patch them, the screws and the plates and all that stuff, you're just putting a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah.
And if you don't figure out why the horse is popping quarter cracks in the first place, screwing them back together is not going to help. It may get you through for a little while, and you take those off, and if you haven't addressed the problem, they're going to crack again. That quarter horse I showed you there, that's the way I got him. They threw everything at him. They even bought hinges from the hardware stores, seriously, and screwed them on and covered them with acrylic. That's that mess I showed you. And they went through the stitching, and they went through the bands. And 3 years, that horse suffered with that crack and bled every barrel race. And it was all just the fact that the heels were folded over. They put the shoe on that folded over heel that was 2 sizes too small, fit way too tight, and he didn't have a chance. They just got in his way. And that was, for as messed up as that foot was, that was pretty relatively easy. I did patch one once. It was a big warm blood that got in a trailer accident. The trailer flipped over. So when you'd walk to the stall, this horse would squat down almost on her belly, and she'd start doing this with her feet. She was terrified of being upside down. And when you go work on her, she was this big. She floated like a breeze. She looked like a dressage horse, but she was a jumper. But she'd stick her feet way out here, and they were big feet, and she was just hammering on the ground, scared to death that you were going to do something or she was going to get upside down again. And she popped a quarter crack that just exploded. And I did stitch that one up, and it worked. But most of the time when I stitch them, they come back if I haven't figured out why the cracks are. So I've had much better luck just floating them.
And on this one, having medial lateral cracks on both front feet, I am pretty certain it's not a function of the horse falling apart. I think the horse is falling apart because of the mechanics.
Yeah,
So I think if we get the mechanics correct, then that's going to go away. And obviously it's going to take a year to grow down. Yeah, 7 months to a year. You know, very occasionally if I have one that's like when he bears weight and you can see that expanding out, say he's headed to a show next weekend, I might patch it just to keep them together, but then it's coming off as soon as he comes back into the barn. I don't typically leave them covered. Yeah.
And he doesn't have any foot.
Yeah.
I mean, he had very shallow, really flat-footed at the toe. I mean, there was absolutely nothing there to work with.
Yeah.
And so if Jason would have cut away those quarters like he wanted to in his head, there would have been nowhere to go.
Yeah.
The horse has to have some time. This would be a prime example of what Savaldi does. Put him in a stall for 24 hours, trim him.
Typically really dry year-round, so they don't change a lot. My performance horses, my jumpers and dressage horses, they go from where I'm at in Southern California, which is, I'm kind of in the desert. The circuit they'll go to Thermal, which is even drier. They'll go to Del Mar by the beach, super wet, and then they go to Vegas, and then they come home.
And they get a bath every day.
And they get a bath every day. But when they go from Thermal to Del Mar, I'll see a foot change by an entire size. They just soak up. And then they go from Del Mar to Vegas, and they shrink down, and all the clinches are loose. So depending on climate, I think in a wetter climate, you'll see things happen quicker. In our wintertime, when we are getting a lot of rain, a horse like this, if I've got foot, I could trim those heels a little bit shorter and just go to the truck and start making shoes, and when you come back, they're gonna be all the way down. In the summertime, it's not as much. Yeah,
We get
so,
horses in from Florida every once in a while, where it's real humid, real soggy, and their feet
Yeah.
just come like this when they sink.
yeah,
And that's where your hard bars and your frog pads really help.
Yeah.
Bring some concavity back in the foot.
a lot
If you
of,
let that keep going, it's just gonna keep getting worse.
yeah, a lot of my board,
Leather on there if it was super wet?
So you can-
Would you throw a leather pad on there if it was super wet?
yeah,
Where I grew up in eastern Washington, we get not a lot of rain, but 110 in the summer and 4 feet of snow in the winter. But most of the horses up there just get kicked out. But where I'm at in California, it's hot, dry in the summer and nasty wet in winter, so they change a lot and they change fast. And some of them, they just, real muddy rainy season, they just come apart.
Probably just follow just a tag full here.
yeah,
And then in the toe, make sure that we don't sheet that medial toe.
right.
Because that's the first spot that is going to sink on the ground. And then his lateral aspect of the foot, we could probably just put a roll with the grinder and or fit right there. But the one that we really don't want to cheat is the medial aspect.
Yeah, and I think that's true, sliders or not. That's probably the biggest part of the foot we don't want to cheat, ever. Front or hind, but in my opinion, especially hind. That's not only the part that they're gonna start the slide in, that's also the part that when that horse is trying to dig in and move, that's the part of the foot he's using.
Yeah, their purchase is going to come from the medial toe quarters.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's where the hot blade of Bloom's hot blade.
Why are you chamfering the outside edge?
Because that's what I'm trying to. I want the flotation on the medial aspect of the foot. Dusty's got a really good trick for a really cool shoe that he makes. It's an awesome torsion exercise.
East-west shoe?
Yeah, have you seen? Well, I don't know if that's the one. I don't know what he calls it.
Where it's pulling the medial toe, section changes like lateral toe.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lateral heels
For that, yeah.
thicker, yeah.
Hawks, Stifles, SI.
I feel like I see that a lot in quarter horse. Like, could use that type of shoe. Yeah.
Evolution shoe. Just trying to reduce the leverage and let them do what they want to do. Right. And then, so, front end is just behind end is, and I can track it like the
Oh yeah, I was just starting, but then I heard him talking about it, I was like, well, maybe he will. I'm glad somebody else is taking it.
60 and 70% more muscle.
But I don't nail enough of them. Probably why it's that way, but
That's good. Might as well do the same thing to the other one. You never open it.
She get on the track and go, she comes, she always had two track.
So I was doing
in stage fright right now. It's nice. It's really cool. This has probably been the toughest feed I've shot all weekend. Honestly. I want to spike him up, but like, yeah.
Those clinchers they gave me, that's the craft door size. Making 13-inch ring. The same thing.
Pretty hard to use on this thing.
Yeah.
What was your question?
For about 6 months, I was just playing with things side to side. Doing my normal punches, couches, clinch, and not punching over. So on the other side was
Good for her, I guess.
I did talk to Bob Marshall a few years ago, and we were talking about
How did you like that first shot?
It's nice. It just takes getting used to it from the other one.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So I have the quick couch, and it's a little bit straighter, so this one's got a curve, so it just takes a little bit of time to.
Do you prefer a hammer or push?
I prefer push. Never been able to use this hammer gouge pretty good, and then one thing that I see in a lot of guys is that with the hammer gouge, they leave a huge hole on the foot. So you come over, you pull the shoes off, and they have bullet holes in them. A little bit of hot rasping. Thank you. So, in a perfect world, I would have been able to drive those nails up there, a third of the wall. But since we started as much in the fronts as we did in the hinds, we were very limited with the amount of foot that we had to work with. So in this case, we have to make sure that we put something that's going to function for him for the next 4 to 5 weeks when the other guy comes to see him. So function of the pretty is always a good thing. Any questions?
Thank you. I didn't want to do it.
Uh-oh, here comes. Go hide.
So Seth, you're prepping for the AW, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on the fit with conformation on the hinds specifically?
I mean, how do you try to do something very similar? Fitting is full, if we can get away with it on the inside, where we're wanting to migrate laterally.
Okay.
And getting behind the bulbs, or under the bulbs, like you did there.
I just worry about that.
All right. You didn't cheat him on the toes.
So when does length become leverage in a scenario like this?
How long
Is it once you leave the bulbs?
How long is the rope?
Depends on how much you cut.
When the length in the hind end, the back end, exceeds the length in the front.
You following it? You understand?
Around center of rotation.
Yeah, you got to be mindful of the center rotation. If you got an inordinate amount of posterior.
So you're saying because we fit out the front of this horse?
Bingo.
Okay.
Bingo.
If we're talking center of rotation.
So how is
we
it
go out
not leverage
front
in
of
both directions?
Because it's in the
we're trying
center.
the ratios, right? It's 50-50, doesn't matter how much the length is in front of the hot side, we're right there. And the reason why, I mean, on the horses that I do every day, I hardly ever perimeter fit unless I have a really nice shaped foot that all the proportions are there. But in this case, you want to make sure that toe has some flotation so it doesn't bear into the ground as soon as it comes to
His
stop.
hawks right now.
He's not going to slide. He's just going to go right to the bottom. You got to have some width and length in the toe, so when he goes to slide, there's a certain amount of lift. It's exclusive to this discipline.
Like you ever seen, I mean, I'm from Mexico, man. We didn't do this as kids. So you sled down the mountain, right? So with a sled, it's the same thing. You have to make sure that front of that is pointing up. Right?
30 years ago, they would set the slider almost an inch ahead of the foot and then fill it in with Equinox, which I didn't understand that. I went to a clinic one time and the guy showed a video and he had 6 of the top 10 reiners in the country had his shoes on. And he said he doesn't mess with the feet at all. He said he trims them like he would anything else. Any modifications he needs to make, he makes them in the shoe. So if they've got the breeding, the athleticism, and the talent, they're going to slide. If they don't, get a different one. But I had a reining horse trainer, and she brought one back from a show, and it had an inch of junk on the front, and it was shoe 3 sizes too big. And they put a broomstick in a boot and show you why that made sense.
Well, like Jaime talked about, also on the medial toe. I mean, that's the motor of that horse. Especially with these hind feet wanting to migrate already like they are. That medial toe's almost not there on this horse to begin with. So he really had to get up and get around that.
So you got to have shoe selection with a nail punch coarser than a medial toe.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
And I think as farriers, we rob that medial toe,
More often
not
than not.
necessarily intentionally, but more often than not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's again, it's not intentionally, obviously, but it's always, it's just like everything else. It's like you can't, especially for me, talking about, I have to be aware of where my limitations so I prevent those from doing, but I believe that a big part of the farriers out there, their hardest part to shoot, their side to shoot is the right side. It's always where I see the distortion, either with me or with anybody. I just look at it, for some reason, the right foot always just looks a little bit, doesn't look as close to what the ideal than the left. And whether we're just right hand dominant or just
I think
the
that's
other
it.
way.
Yeah.
It's like, physically, it's the hardest per foot to get around.
And if you're, we call it the fat right-handed farrier syndrome. If you're a big guy and you're right-handed, you can't see around your belly, you're going to go this way. So you're going to have feet that go like that.
Right.
We see that a lot.
All right. Any
Job,
questions?
Jaime.
Thank you.
You're forging too, you see the inside of it.
Oh, absolutely. I
Like
mean,
your leading edge is on the
A lot of
toe,
people-
the right
Yeah.
a lot of us will just naturally make one side of shoes better.
It's funny.
Muscle memory takes over, you don't even think about it. Like with Jason, when he made those shoes, he made them totally separate and they lined right up on each other.
It's funny, you go to a certification, Dusty's like, you know what, you made a beautiful right. But looks like a left.
Gotta go on
He
the
takes it
other side.
on the other foot, flips it around.
That's the longest tube doing ever.
This stuff's pretty forgiving.
And the heat gun just has to be
Has to be at least
rated
1200 degrees. Yeah, because you'll see it start getting shiny.
Ain't that smoke?
Well, yeah, but I have them in, we have them in our juice, we have them in the house.
And you're right, I was about to do it upside down. I have no feeling in my hands, so I wouldn't do this at home. But, and then I set it down. You see how the liquid is kind of moving? Just keep doing that. And if your table that you do this on is sticky at all, you can get some spray silicone and spray your table. You see how there's no drops in there at all. Now, if I was to jump right in and do the rest of it right now, part of this would peel up. I learned that the hard way many times being in a hurry. So let that settle a little bit so it's in there, and then go in.
Your client was riding the horse in the ocean with these welded like that.
Yeah, and they stayed on. I would never in a million years thought that they would last with salt water, but they did. So the same client, I gave her to my apprentice, so I don't talk to her too much. Really nice lady, but just a screwed up. She comes up to me, she goes, ask some questions about my horse. I said, okay. So she gets the horse out, I'm loading up my truck every week. She asked me a whole bunch of questions, and I answered her. She goes, that's so cool. And I said, what? She goes, AI said the same thing. And I said, you asked AI for horseshoeing advice? And she said, I did. I said, are they going to glue the shoes on for you? She went, huh? I think they do too. I think that
Probably more than
the internet is one of the worst things that ever happened to the shoeing business.
He has it with the light and without the light.
It's a lot quicker than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it doesn't take long.
Yeah. All right. I know. Yeah, well,
And did the slip prongs weld up just as easy?
They do, the black ones, but you gotta sand them down so you got something to glue to. I mean, these are pretty straight. Normally, I would sand that down to make it a little bit flyer, but this works. But there you go. And then I'll come by. I usually do that seam. I hit that seam once really good.
I've never found a shoe that was breathing shoes fit well.
And then
No, I hate using them.
I love the concept.
Yeah.
The applications are.
But he says he just grinds the sides of them off and then he screws these onto them.
Try it. Yeah. Put it down. Like Rob said, I can't give these things away either. I don't use these. I use those other cups. But
Don't pull on it because I already lifted it up.
and we want to try one? Come on, cut yourself a piece.
Are you gonna let him glue it on the claw, bro?
Say what now?
You're gonna let him glue it on the claw?
If he buys the clog, he can glue whatever he wants on there.
You gonna buy that one? How much are they?
I have no idea.
I don't know. That sounds dangerous. Here, I'll do it on this. Then we can use this shoe.
Kevin, can you go find out how much a clog is?
Pretty quick.
Yeah, it doesn't take long. The heat gun. It's hot enough.
So then run over here and get this.
Yeah.
Just let it run.
Yeah, and then I go back and forth just to make sure it's.
Stewart clogs 34 pair, EDSS brown rubber 22, Echo cast 5650, wood clog with the leather rim 5250, Eva clog
There you go.
5250, Freedom shoes 61 pair.
I could do these at home and then bring them.
Yeah. If you want to do resets on these, that's a good way to do it if you can't get them off. But the main thing I do is if they don't fit the foot,
Yep.
I want them to, especially on hind feet if I have to do on hinds, which I don't do very often, mostly just fronts. But you get, like, if you get a clubby footed horse and they want to go on shoe, there's not a shoe you can go on that actually fits unless you modify it. Piece of cake, huh?
Yeah.
And this doesn't get as hot as mine, but it works really good. I didn't come up with this. I watched the video, and that's where I got the 1200 degree thing. Glad to go out and buy one.
Ooh.
I'm probably getting mine a little hotter than you did. 'Cause I got
You ever drop a knife in a kitchen and go to grab it? That's the same thing.
Yeah, make sure you got it right in. I have my apprentice that shoots, but because I don't have feel in my fingers anymore.
Do that one.
And you guys know Stuart Muir from Reed and Riddle?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Last time I heard him speak, he glues on almost everything now. He said, why take a risk of poking the horse with a nail? I thought, oh, that makes sense.
Oh, it does get hotter. Takes a while to shut off. When you use it, a little hotter. Yeah.